Hello and welcome to TheoryCraft. This is episode 4, the show where I tell you how to play video games, but I'm not going to tell you how to play video games today. We're going to talk about video games with wonderful guests because the 4th show of every month is going to be an interview. And today I'm going to be interviewing none other than my good friend, one of my best friends, in fact, I dare say, Ricky Bidoux, Bidoux. He's a tournament organizer. He's a manager. He's a commentator. What else has he done? He's a ZOTAC admin. He's a whole lot of things, and he's been in this community for a long, long time. And I'm really happy to do an interview with him. I'll first say, since this is the first intro, first interview, I'll do a little bit of an intro on that and what the sort of idea of these interviews is going to be, because this is a show about learning, of course, and we want to be able to learn something from these interviews. We don't want to talk about our guest's favorite pizza over and over again. We'd like to gain something. So I'm going to go into these interviews with the idea of learning something. So even if we can get one little tiny nugget of knowledge out of every person that I interview, that's perfect. If it's one little 5-second sentence that they say, and that's all we get out of the interview, that's beautiful. As long as we can learn something, that's my goal. So I'm going to try to ask questions that can gain us something within the game, or gain us something, about competing or about managing, about coaching players, but something to make us better as gamers, as we all are. So that's the idea with these interviews, and this is the first one. And I'm doing Bidoux, and I think it's really good because me and Bidoux have quite the history together, and we've known each other for probably, I think, 11 years now or something. But I honestly don't really know anything about Bidoux other than what's happened in the last maybe 2 years. So there's a lot for me to learn. I'm really excited to ask Bidoux questions, a lot of questions, in fact, and learn what we can from him. And it's going to be fun. With that being said, Bidoux, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Super excited to be on the show. I really like the concept that you're doing with the interviews. I think it's going to be cool, and I'm happy to be the first, and not the last, but the first one to ride this wave with you. We're just going to have a little chill conversation, We're just going to talk about... Man, when you asked me to do this, I had to think back of, because I've been... Maybe it dived into the professional Warcraft 3 scene for at 11 years. I got the timestamps and stuff. It's a long time. And you're like, well, I'll be talking about your past. And I'm like, wow, I have to actually dig up all the stuff I've done. I've done a lot of stuff over the years. And I think it's brought me to where we are now, where I am now with Dust Gaming, and what we do together now. But it's been a long road, and it's been cool, man. It's been cool.
Very cool. Yeah, and people may not know that we manage a team together for the past 2.5 years. That's mostly how we know each other, is through managing a team together. And we, of course, do commentary together and stuff like that. But we pretty much worked together on and off for about 10 years. But, you went to Starcraft for a bit, and I stayed in Warcraft. But I think it's worth saying that we probably, neither of us would be in Warcraft right now if it weren't for each other. Because I remember when we started Dust again in Warcraft about 2-3 years ago, you said, I'm not going to come back unless we do it together. And I said, well, I'm probably just going to quit if we don't do it together. So I think it's worth saying that there would be, whatever you call the content we do, there would be none of it if it weren't for both of us sort of being in it together. I think that's a cool thing, right?
Well, I knew going into it, if we were going to hop into this, I wanted to do it right. And I wanted to go all the way. And I think when I first started Dust 10 years ago, I didn't trust anybody. I just want to do everything by myself. It's better to do it by yourself. I'll explain why, actually, if we get to the right questions. Because hatching it out, there was a reason behind everything. But I was thinking, in 2018, when we're let's go back to Warcraft 3, because this hype with Reforge is going to be sick, and maybe we can make something out of the NA scene. I said, let's do it together, or I won't do it. If you leave, I'm done too. And I think if I leave, you're done too. But let's do it together. I think it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, it's a lot of work, man. No, I'm excited we did that. We took the plunge.
Yeah, because I was really on the fence at the time, right? I was sort of playing a ladder game every month or something, and we were messaging on Skype or whatever it was. I don't think I even used Discord 3 years ago. But I was just sort of really on the fence of whether I wanted to continue playing, because there was no teams and there's no leagues, and you were not in the scene at all at the time. You weren't playing, you were purely in StarCraft, and I kept messaging you yo, let's play 2v2 or something like that. Are you ever going to come back to Warcraft? And then out of nowhere, we were suddenly just all right, let's do this. And now all of a sudden, 3 years later, it feels like we've sort of never done anything else. It feels like these 3 years have lasted since the beginning of Warcraft 3 almost.
Yeah, I think it was the right time for me though. Like 2018, I was 6 years into the Starcraft II thing,
Hmm.
and I think it was really just a passion thing for me. I was just losing it. I was losing my passion to like just keep working for Starcraft II. The hype was fading, events were slowing down. Everything was just getting kind of lackadaisical, and that's where it kind of is now. I mean, they
Hmm.
announced that Starcraft II is getting like no more funding for anything.
Right.
Going forward, we're seeing like regions lose their qualifiers and all these tournaments that Southeast Asia players used to make a ton of money. They're not making anything now, so kind of got out at the right time, I think.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't think it would ever like get us where we are now, but which I would say is a very cool spot. It's a manageable spot.
Hmm.
We'll touch on that a little bit later, I think. But
Hmm.
yeah, just I think it was the right time. 6 years into StarCraft, I learned a lot, but
Yeah.
I think and I think that's helped me like in the Warcraft 3 scene because I feel like a lot of people are still stuck in the old times and the dark ages, like when it comes to marketing and business and socials and all this
Yes.
stuff. There's a few people that are ahead of the curve. We work with one of them, Neo, but
Hmm.
a lot of people are just kind of stuck in the mud that way. And I feel like I had a lot to bring to the table and show new players that, yeah, they're good at the game, but there's more than just the game if you want to get to the highest level. And so I learned all that from StarCraft 2. And yeah, it was just the right time. It's the right time to move back to Warcraft.
Yeah, I think you touch on. I do want to get into sort of your beginnings in Warcraft and everything, but you touched on a really cool point there, where players might actually kind of dig this in that marketability as a player. Like, you don't necessarily have to be the top player in the world, but you do have to be marketable. I think games like Dota and Counter-Strike are really good examples of that, where the players that, although we don't necessarily have the biggest salaries or anything in Warcraft at least, but the players that are more marketable, even if they're not the best in the entire scene, they get bigger salaries and they get bigger deals and they get more sponsorships and stuff like that, and that's just purely through social media and just being like a sociable, marketable player. I think that's a really interesting thing you brought up right there.
Yeah, I always thought it was, and I started Dust StarCraft 2 team with like, let's harbor upcoming talent and win tournaments, win the major tournaments,
Right.
and be famous. And that's what it takes. I just need to win MLG,
Hmm.
or I just need to win DreamHack, and then that's
Right.
it. Razor's
Yeah.
just gonna throw money at me.
Yeah.
That was like my mindset going into it, and it's just completely wrong. You don't even have to have decent results at the game.
Hmm.
You don't have to have results at all in a game. Marketability is way higher than that now. Social media outreach, trying to sell a product, promote a product,
Hmm.
having a fan base is way more than ever having results for the most part. I think a lot of people don't understand that. I learned that a lot in StarCraft because, I mean, we got picked up by a company,
Hmm.
TT Esports,
Yep.
in 2016. For 2 years, we worked with them. And honestly, we never won anything, but we used our marketing and we just advertised their products. And we basically just became like an advert walking billboards for them. And
Yeah.
that was way more profitable than ever being grandmaster or ever, having a high ladder rank or ever being like going to tournaments and even winning. We would just
Hmm.
go and have fun. And we got the job done anyway. So I think a lot of people in Warcraft 3 don't understand that at all.
Mm.
And I think that translates to everything. It translates to work ethic. Well, if I can't beat the first place player, I don't want to play at all. And what's the point of doing this? It won't get me anywhere. And it's just lack of knowledge. Marketability, social media is so big, and it's more than the game.
Yeah, that's a funny point you make. Almost the naivety of thinking like we have to win an MLG to make any money in this game, and
That's
that's what people think in Warcraft as well, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Like if I can't beat Happy in Europe, then what's the point of even doing anything? And it's
Yeah.
so wrong. That's why like I love what Crab's doing with
Yes.
the tweets and
Hmm.
he's putting in efforts with like cool graphics and funny. He's engaging people and people are talking about him. Where I worked with Crab in 2010, he never
Hmm.
did any of that. Nobody ever talked about him. He never got anywhere. But now, people can see him. And if you're like a company, you might not even know how good he is.
Yeah.
But he's the one that's getting all these engagements on Twitter. Like I want to talk to this guy. I don't
Hmm.
care about this guy who won first place. I don't even know if he has Twitter, which some of them don't.
Yes.
Marketability is so big, and yeah, it's a weird concept when you have players that aren't necessarily good at the game that they're getting sponsored in, that are reaping the rewards because they're so marketable.
Yeah, and people almost they think there's sort of like two sides to being successful in esports. And, you know, you always have to make a caveat that in Warcraft it can be hard to be, you know, the top sort of salaried players within esports, but there's still possibilities. We see people on mouse sports and stuff, for instance. Moon just got picked up in a salaried position. That is Moon, of course, but there are positions still in RTS and still in Warcraft, but people sort of think there's two sides to being good or being successful, and that's, you know, hard work and talent. But the hard work side is always like, how many games do I grind, right? Like the Hitman side of hard work. Like, do I play 8 hours a day after I get home from work? Do I study my replays? Stuff like that. What they don't take into account, I think, for the hard work side of things, is that it's also, did I make a Twitter post when I went live on stream? Am I streaming? Do I have, you know, notifications set up, sort of thing? Am I building a fan base? Am I being positive towards people? Am I not burning bridges with tournament organizers and people, you know, in the scene and stuff like that? If people don't necessarily think, they think like, oh, if I don't have the talent and I can't beat Happy or Hitman, then there's nothing else I can do to sort of rise up the ranks of the sort of esports ladder, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been trying to touch on with some of the players that we have on our team, is just like, you know, like, stream, be out there, get yourself out there. You don't even have to win. Like, some of these guys have personalities too. They're funny, they're interesting, they're clever and witty. Like, show that, because people, you know, outside of the game, people love to be entertained. And if you could just harness like some form of entertainment, like, that's another way too. You can get by and get through with anything, but social media is way more powerful than hoisting a DreamHack trophy will ever be, in my opinion. I mean, of course, there's exceptions like Dota. If you win the international, there's just levels of things that go inside with it, right? But someone like Moon, in your case, you know, Moon's marketable whether he does anything.
Yes.
Just the thought of, like, he could just say like, I want to stream sometime, and the forums will just go nuts with like, Moon's going to stream. He doesn't even have to turn on a stream for 3 years, but people are still going to be hyped up. That's just the hype that he has. Sky has that. Grubby has that. So many people have those, like, just those wow factor brands where it's like, you could say anything and it'll draw a crowd. And I don't know what Moon's position is, but he just recently signed with a team. But I don't know if he needs the money or what. I don't know if he, like, because he's always been very picky. I actually, like, tried to negotiate a deal with Moon for Starcraft II, and he's expensive, very unrealistically expensive. And I wonder if he, like, lowered his expectations to join this team and said, well, you know what, I'd rather get something than keep the bar so high and get nothing, or if they, like, actually gave him a huge offer. But I mean, he's worth what they're saying. It's just, how can you use his brand and get that return on investment? I think in Warcraft 3 it's hard to do, but his team found a way to do it, and good for him. I hope more people can find those niches, because it's not necessarily targeting the Razors and the Steel Series to get where you need to go. There's a lot of companies that are just, you know, they really want any form of advertising. There's what I'm trying to say is, like, you don't have to target the big companies.
Yes.
You can really just find a niche that's good to you. Find a company that you actually want to work with, that's easy to work with, and they want exposure too. And in Warcraft 3, I think it's one of the easiest categories on Twitch, for example, to grow your stream.
Yeah. Sure.
Warcraft 3 community, man, is so, like, everyone's watching, everyone's trying to engage. It's crazy. I think Warcraft 3 is a great channel to try to grow your thing, and it's hard to pitch that to companies, but but there's definitely a market there.
Yeah, and there's almost some companies talking about not going to the top, to the Razors and the Logitechs or whatever, but somewhere in the middle. And those companies in the middle might almost be getting the good end of the deal with some of these streamers in Warcraft, because, like you say, if there's one big streamer on, if, you know, Grubby's on and no one else is on, they're all going to him. If Insup's on and no one else is on, they're all going to him. Same with streamers like Hitman or Cruncher, you know, back to Warcraft. If there's no one else streaming, everyone just sort of funnels into one stream. So those companies in the middle might be getting really good deals by going into a Warcraft streamer, even though they might not, you know, get a share of the prize or whatever. That's not that much, but the marketability is there and the viewership is there because it's all this one community, this one hive mind that just sort of goes to each stream over and over again. Like, we'll see, you know, in the chat for the stream we're on right now, we'll see a lot of the same people that we're going to see in Hitman's chat in 5 hours or something like that. Like, it's always the same people, but the numbers are still the numbers, and, you know, companies are going to look at that, and they might almost be getting a good deal with that, I would say.
Yeah, it's all like different. It's all negotiated. Like there's no like foolproof method. If there is, I don't have it. But all you can really do is just look at what you guys have to offer and then try to amplify that in a way that you can help somebody else, like advertise another company or whatever. And it's hard to do, but it's not impossible. And like you said, there's companies that are getting squeezed out by the big time companies that are just too big, and they're still, I mean, they're still looking for advertising. They still want to get into the market, and they feel like they can't unless they pick up a Shroud or unless they pick up, someone else. But it's not true. You can get the same return going for like a smaller, not smaller, but something with reach, and that could vary from having whatever reach you have. So yeah.
Yeah, it's almost the same philosophy that they have that the players were having that we were speaking on earlier. Like, if I don't win MLG, I'm not worth anything. If I don't pick up Shroud, I'm not worth anything, or I can't get my return on investment. When really, if we just all work together and we're all trying our best to be marketable, because all it is really eyes on a product is what at the end of the day they're looking for. If we put in the effort, we don't have to win MLG and we don't have to be Shroud necessarily, I would say.
I mean, I don't have a tracking record, but how many monsters do you think were bought extra during the DreamHack phase just because they sponsored our tournament? I know I bought Monster whenever I needed to. Spent a couple $100, bought a lot of Monster, drank a lot of Monster because they were supporting the event. I don't know, like maybe a lot more people did. Maybe it's worth it. Everyone's tweeting about it, talking about it. Maybe someone tweets about it. Like maybe I tweet about it and then someone is like, just sees the tweet, goes buy one. You never know. There's no way to actually like translate the algorithm, but any advertising is good advertising. So like just like having a product like that's obviously easy to market. It's a drink, makes it easier. But yeah, there's just it's more than just playing good at the game. And that going back to what I was saying, I think the Warcraft 3 era is kind of stuck in the mud where not many people are trying to build a brand and trying to advertise themselves and make themselves beyond the game. But you know what I mean? Like there's definitely you can do it in this game.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There are more goals than just being the very, very best in your region, and there are more things to work towards, and there are more ways to achieve sort of the goal. If your goal is to be in the position of a top competitor, at least have eyes on you and be respected or whatever, and be invited to these big tournaments. You don't necessarily have to be winning all of them, but you just have to do that extra work of marketability and stuff like that. And yeah, I think Warcraft is also cool in that regard because lots of people, you mentioned the Monster point, lots of people are going to support it just because it's Warcraft. And like, oh, Monster's sponsoring Warcraft, that's so cool for all of us because we all stuck with this game for 15 years. And like now Monster's supporting us, I want to support them because that's so cool. It's sort of like this big brother company that might be unique to Warcraft. It may not be. But it feels like when a company supports us, we want to support them back. And that's been true, at least for the past few years, because we're so used to having nothing.
Yeah, and if they give $100,000 to ESL, are they going to get $100,000 worth of Monster sales? I don't know.
Yeah.
But they definitely have a model in place that's sustainable. Otherwise, they wouldn't go into it. I assume they're smart business people. So they're definitely seeing a return somewhere. And like we said, it's a 3-year slog. So DreamHack's going to be around for a while. I think it's great.
For sure. Okay, cool. That was a really interesting point you brought up. But let's go back. I want to start with, how about you just get me to the day that you're installing Warcraft 3, your history in gaming up till you pressed install on Reign of Chaos. Get me to that point in sort of just your life in general, and more so your history of just gaming and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. So I remember the first time I played the game. It was at my buddy's house, Anthony. He's the one that bought me this headset. He watches the stream sometimes too. He thinks it's crazy how he showed me the game, and now I'm like on a screen. It's pretty wild. But yeah, I remember he was playing this game, Warcraft 3. It was TFT at the time, 1.26 patch, and I didn't know any of that at the time. But he's like, man, this game is so fun. You play 4v4, and you just make a ton of units. And you just like try to kill the other guys for mass army. So he started me in 4v4, and it was basically at the time where our computers were so bad that at the 100 foods, the computers would just get to like 5 FPS.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
And we would just try to frantically like spam our AOE attacks and just like hope that when the FPS cleared up because everyone's losing their army, we won. And we would just like mass chims, and we'd be like chims, and we'd be losing our mind. And that's how I first started the game, was in his rec room playing Warcraft 3 TFT. And then I went home and bought the game. I got my parents to buy the game. I was this was 2009.
Okay.
So this was 11 years ago. I would have been no, 2009 is way more, right?
12.
How
About 12
12
years.
years ago. Yeah, 12 years ago. So I would have been 15.
15. Yeah.
And yeah, late bloomer. But
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, 2009, download the game, and I just started playing 4v4s as well. And then I got into the custom game section.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a couple months later, but I got into the custom game, and this is where I started getting really obsessed because there were game names called 1v1 OBS Pros.
Yeah.
1v1 OBS Pros. And I'm thinking, pros? Hell yeah, I want to watch some pros.
Mm-hmm.
And I get into the game, and there's like, it's a 12 lobby, so it's hard to get in, and there's famous people in there that I never knew before, but you know, some of them were like Pure and OC, and a lot of the Axe Effect, I guess was his name, and this was right during the time where he 2-1'd Grubby.
Yep. Okay.
In an actual match, so everyone was talking about the Axe Effect. He had the Archimond icon. He was like the biggest talk on East, and whenever he joined a game, everyone tried to flood the game. It was so hard to get in. And I became immediately obsessed with these players that were like so good and idolized.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to watch them play. I wanted to watch how good they were. And I would watch 1v1 OBS Pros 9 hours a day. I wouldn't sleep. I'd stay up till 4 in the morning. My dad would have to say, turn that computer off. And then I'd finally get off. But I just became obsessed with these guys that, you know, pro at a video game. I never understood that. When I was younger, when I was like a couple years before that, we had Halo on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first time like Final Boss, straight ripping, like we were watching these like pro players, right? Walshy, Welshie or Welshie? Walshy, I think. Yeah. And that was on TV. So we were actually in our living room watching Halo Pro. We're like, what? This is crazy. So that, like, I got the first whiff of like pro gaming there.
Yeah.
And then just the thought of this Warcraft 3 game, that one I thought was really cool. And two, had tons of pro players. Pro players, you know, they're all retired ex-semi-pros now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I just became obsessed, and I wanted to be friends with them. And I wanted to watch all their games. And that's how it all started. And, yeah, I just would spam 1v1 OBS games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I met.
You weren't playing then at all, right?
No,
you were just watching. You didn't play at all.
Just watching. Yeah. I never would watch and then be like, "Oh, I want to play on my own." Never. I would just OBS. Right. I would have. I think when I deleted my computer, my hard drive, I had 33,000 replays. 33,000 observer replays. Yeah. I would spam 1v1. I would make them 1v1 OBS Pros, and I would because nobody would make them at the velocity that I wanted to watch them.
Yes.
So I would be the one hosting them, and then. Just obsessed. And yeah, there was a few players that, you know, I first caught my eye was the Axe Effect, OC, obviously. And then there was a group. There was Panda Lee. Was another one. So this is where it gets away from just custom games and into like a competitive format. Was Panda Lee was a night elf. He was really good, and he always played the 1v1 customs. And there was a guy named Aki the boss, and he was like, let's make a league team. And I was like, dude, I have to get into this. And he's like, okay, you can help me run the team. This is my first role as a manager. And so we joined this league, and it's pretty wild. And at the time, I'm still hosting 1v1 customs. And this is when the Blizzard Pro ladder's out, so everyone's on these new account names, and this is where
explain what that is for people, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are new to the game in the past couple of years that might not have any idea what Blizzard Pro ladder was.
Yeah, so in 2009 or 2010, they made a pro ladder, and it was a one-time ladder, and if you came top 8 in this ladder, you got to go to BlizzCon. They would send you an invite. Everybody was trying to get top 8. It was super hard, super competitive. And this was across the board. I think it was NA, it was the East server, and then Europe, and then Asia. And maybe Asia was picked some other way, but I just remember following players, and this is where I started to get into the competitive scene a little bit more. through 1v1 Hobbs Pros, really.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so I joined this league team, and at the time there was a tournament that Panda Lee liked playing, and it was called the ZOTAC Cup. And it was every Saturday or Sunday. I actually forget.
I only played one ever, so I don't.
It was
remember.
Saturdays, I think. I think it was Saturday morning, and God, it was such a long time ago. And I was like, this is cool. And then this is where, you know, ZOTAC Cup, you look at the bracket and there's players like Remind and Fly and Grubby, and you're like, who are these guys? And these are like the guys that everyone's talking about. And this is on Garena, where everyone GGC at the back in the day, and you would join. You would be praying that someone would list the room that it's going to be in, because they had like Room 1 or GGL Room 1 or something like that, and you never knew what ZOTAC channel it was going to be in. So you would just constantly be spamming the channels, and one day you would see like MYM Grubby level 45 on G-Arena, and you're like, holy crap, holy crap, that's him. And that just blew my obsession even more. I was like, I need to be a part of this tournament. And that's when I just reached out to ZOTAC. So this is 2010. I just reached out to Ruffy, I think. He was the head director at Game Sports, the main admin. I said, hey, man, I just really want to be a part of this. And he's like, send me like an application. And I was like, an application?
Right.
Oh, God, I have to write a serious. So I have the email I sent. It's really cringe.
Right.
But it's basically like, why do you want to be a ZOTAC admin? And I wrote like, I just really love the game, and I'm super passionate. I love like watching pros and stuff like that. I can host, because that was a big thing too. They were looking for like East Coast hosts for the Korea versus Europe and Korea versus
because
NA.
The host would go to literally where you live. You would be
your ping. Yeah, the host's ping is what you would have. And I was East Coast, man. I was Niagara region, and man, all the Koreans, they would have good ping to me.
Yep.
And other East Coast, they get like 250. For me, they get 213. So they would always say like, Bidoux, I want Bidoux to host. And there was Vegeta 100. He was another good host. But yeah, so that's how I got involved with the ZOTAC Cup. So I would be there every Saturday morning, ready to go, just hosting for these guys and running support tickets and stuff like that, which is it was a nightmare, because the first hour of the ZOTAC Cup is just people spamming their opponent isn't there because they didn't want to wait 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Or spamming that they want the def win, saying they need a better host. It was the worst first hour ever. And then
it wouldn't be the top players yet either. You'd be dealing
it would
with
be unknown people that they're just going to get wiped out. But you have to help them out. So I'm just constantly like, yeah, 1 second. Yeah, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. Yep, sorry, 1 second. I'll host it. Then I would host games and then just leave right away. So like the game's up and then go right back to the next ticket and just like, yeah, okay, I'll host you. Yeah, what server? Okay, game name, join, leave. And I would just constantly be making servers, making games and leaving, making games and leaving. And then you do that for like an hour and a half. And then because that's how long the first round takes sometimes. And then as soon as the round was done or whatever, it starts to build up, it would slow down a bit. And then you got into your top 8 and stuff like that, which is always exciting. And yeah.
So what kind of players are you seeing there when you're hosting? So you mentioned players like Panda Lee and OC or the Axe Effect on NA. What other sort of players are you seeing on NA? And then when you move to these ZOTAC Cups, what sort of names are you seeing there that you haven't
I'll be honest
before?
with you. There was never really much participation from NA. There'd be the occasional cruncher, the occasional Sonky. Danger would play a lot.
Right.
He would be out early. Most of them would be out early unless they had a really good run. It was at 8 in the morning for me, or 9 in the morning for me, which meant it was at like 8 in the morning for Central, 6 in the morning for West Coasters. So it wasn't very ideal. And maybe that affected a bit of it, but also the whole like, well, I can't beat Focus, I can't beat Remind, so what's the point?
The same mentality that we have now.
And it was winner takes all. So it's a tough sell, but I always looked at it as like, dude, it's great practice.
Yeah.
Great practice.
Absolutely.
And you get to meet guys, and if you have a good game against someone like Focus, you can say like, hey man, can I add you? We can practice sometime. Bam, you got a practice partner, right? And that's what I did. So I would host for all these pro players, Bly, very big man who has passed away and stuff, but just these dynamite players, Space, Korean Undead, just these like absolute superstars. Yeah. And I would host for them every weekend. I was reliable. And then when I had my teams, I would always be like, hey, Bly, do you mind playing a best of 3 with this guy? He needs practice. Or Focus, can you play a best of 3? And they were always down. I don't know why. but I built that connection through ZOTAC. And I just built this this contact book of just tons of pros.
Yeah.
And it just like kind of like skyrocketed me into the scene. And yeah. And this was when I was like 16 years old.
So you must be getting like kind of you could almost say like an eye for talent at this point. Like, was there things that you were noticing? Because for me personally, like when I play the game, obviously you get good mechanically in the game and you have a good intuition for that. But when I'm just watching the game, which I do for shows like this and when we're doing commentary and stuff, it's almost like I'm practiced in watching the game. I can click into a replay, fast forward 10 minutes and know who's ahead and who's behind and know what plays they should both do, because you can see you're the eye in the sky. You can see both players. Were you starting to sort of get a good eye for this? You say 33,000 games. Was there some things you were noticing as well that were different from like the sort of 30,000 NA games you had watched to the new like Korean players or Chinese players that you were now watching with these sort of practice in observing games?
Yeah. So this is where it gets confusing, because I never really understood the nuances of the game at that time. I never knew what things or timings, build orders.
Yeah.
But I would watch a lot of games and I could literally see this player is way better. He's getting away with things he shouldn't be. This player will win because he's better, or this player's ahead. And you know what? He's too good to lose this lead. He's going to win. And that's how I would gauge talent and also like if you're a weaker player playing a good player, you can do good things. And I could see that you had a good game versus TH, one map. This guy's got potential.
Yes.
If he comes to NA, he's going to beat these guys.
Yeah.
Or if he plays against a weaker player, he's going to do good. And what people see is a loss. Well, he lost to him, but there's more to it than that. I was kind of looking at it like that, like potential in players. And that was based on just how they competed against pros. And maybe it was their attitude too, because I would talk to some of them and they're like, yeah, man, I'm gonna rock them, and they would lose, but it was a good game.
Yeah. And
that's the way I kind of like looked at games, because I couldn't tell you like, oh, he did a 3-farm tech and his 2 racks was really late, or I didn't know anything about that. I still don't. But he just I would just look at potential in players, and it was gauged in my own head, and I had my own eye for it, and it's hard to explain.
Right.
But it made sense to me, and it usually was right. Because if I picked up that one player and put him against who I thought he would beat, he would win.
Right.
Matchmaking wise, which is like what you do as a manager. You try to make lineups and try to win. And yeah, I just had an eye for like potential in players, and that was through watching them play ZOTAC Cups and stuff.
Yeah. Was there what was I gonna say? Was there sort of these players and they sort of did things that were inexplicable in game, but you were sort of like noticing that they were just better? Like, were there players that were doing these things that were sort of new and innovative and stuff like that, and you were noticing them make these plays and sort of develop week to week as you would continue watching them? And maybe they weren't known as sort of the top players, but you would sort of watch these guys and be like, this guy's doing something interesting this week. And then you sort of watch him like, 20 ZOTACs later, all of a sudden this guy is like one of the top players. Was there any players like that you sort of watched rise up and they were doing new things? Because there's players like Loliet, for instance, I know was a very weak player for a very long time. And same with Chaemiko and Sock, Foggy even. Very weak players for literally years. But then all of a sudden, something clicks and I'm sure they're doing a lot of things right for such a long time, but then it's just the one thing they needed to switch on, and all of a sudden they're like top players. Loliet, of course, is a rank 1 player at a time.
Yeah, so a player like Loliet was always very good. But he would I think it was an attitude thing, because he would say, I'm not Moon, I'm not right. Soccer, I can't beat these players. And now I think he just thinks like, yeah, he can. He was always very, very good. And like if there was like a top 8 in Asia, he was always scratching at it. There were a lot of players that were scratching at it. There were a lot of players that were actually horrible. Chaemiko was a really bad player.
Yeah. Right.
When I was watching him play, he was out round 1 of ZOTAC all the time. He was under the name U2 Chae Young. He was one of the bad Koreans.
Was there any inklings there though when you would watch him that he might be?
No,
because I think he might be my favorite player.
He was one of those written off players, honestly.
Right.
In my head, he was just like, he doesn't have it. So like when I came back in 2018 and Che Miko's on the top, I'm like, wow, good for him. I don't know what he did.
Right.
But even he would say like, I think he would say like, yeah, he was really bad. He just wasn't. He wouldn't. I don't remember any reputable results from that guy, but he stuck it out. I mean, he really stuck it out.
And email fans as well, of course, who's now SOC. Right.
Yeah, Evo fans was always he was always in the top.
Competitor, at least.
Competitor. Yeah, he was competitive. He would come in the quarterfinals and maybe drop out to one of the tougher Chinese players, but he was always competitive. But yeah, looking at it now, there's a lot of players that have definitely risen up. Loliet has definitely improved a lot. He's become one of the best in the world. And but at the lower levels, he was always crushing them. Always a go-to player for me, at least, because I worked with him a lot in Rage, and then and that was it. And yeah, but like you said, did you ever like see, like, you're observing games and see like, yeah, man, I would be trying to watch games, and then all of a sudden the Blood Mage was in the main base. Flame Strike. I'm like, how do you even get there? Because he walked a peasant through and staffed in. These were all like new things that you're like, whoa, this guy's amazing.
Like little clicks of like, star sense, I think people call it.
Yeah, little shades of stardom, and you're like, whoa, this guy is insane. And this would be like an American or something, and you're like, whoa, that was really cute.
Yeah,
it was a cute play, stuff like that. And you're like, okay, well, if he can do that, then he can beat this unknown player that I put him against, stuff like that. But yeah, just a really just built an eye for all this stuff. And yeah.
I don't think people actually quite realize when you're going into these cups, when all the best players are playing in them, the very tippity top of the world, and you're going in there as like just some unknown North American player, and you don't win the game, but you make it close. I don't think people quite realize, because I've played people in the past, because I've done cups like this, like Happy and stuff like that. It is so hard to even do damage to the units. As like a player like myself who's not very good at playing against like a top player in the world, it's so hard to do anything, to actually get an advantage against players like that. Even if you lose the game, like that is extremely impressive. To go against a player like Infi or TH currently and even be ahead for a minute, like if you aren't a known player, you have some amount of talent. And I'm sure you saw that a lot with tier 3 NA players even, right?
Yeah, well, that was when I was watching games like TH Yumiko, where they would just expand and hold these tier 3 undead pushes with 2 towers and a hero. And you're like, what? How are they doing this? If they had any footies, the other player was backing off. It was crazy. And you're just thinking, okay, this guy is just on a different level.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're just watching these guys that are just like way better. And like you said, there's a difference between 1v1 obs pros on East and then watching these games. These were just like games of a way higher caliber.
Yeah.
Everything's calculated. Everything is just like pinpoint. The right clicks, like just like maximizing damage as opposed to just kind of winging it that you would see a lot on BNet. Yeah, just like crazy talent. And like you said, like players didn't understand, if you have a good performance in one ZOTAC Cup, doesn't have to be the whole cup. It could be one map against a good player. That player will remember you. If you're from America, that's the thing. If you're from a region that's not very well known and you put up a good game against Focus, if I went up to Focus and said, hey, do you want to practice with that guy? He'll be like, yeah, yeah, I do. And that guy will be like, why does he want to play with me? I got trashed. It's like, no, bro, you looked good. And now like you have a practice partner. Now you're playing against, and that's one of the biggest things I did with Duck.
Right.
Duck was one of those players that at the time, and you could vouch too, he was exceptionally good. He was almost like Checky level good at the time. And nobody knew who he was. And I just said, Duck, I'm going to give you these games with Loliet and Shishi and Moon and Ted. And because at the time I was with eHOME, and just saying I work with eHOME, people would just, yeah, no problem, which was great.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, Duck, I'm just going to open the door. I just want you to play. Because as soon as Moon plays you once, you can add him as a friend, and he's a constant practice partner for you. And the first game, Duck beats him on TS or EI. He beats him on EI. And that's when Moon went Warden, and Duck destroyed him in a practice game. And I just went, my work here's done. There we go. Duck, you've made it. You know what I mean? And then like Moon would play him a lot and just like stuff like that. So people didn't understand like these players like Moons and stuff, they get bored of playing Fly and all the same people over and over and over again. They like new styles. They like, and NA always had like a different style.
Yes.
But I think the mentality was like, they're too big for me. So why would I waste my time? Right. And it's like they're real people, man, just like you. Like they want to get better. They want to talk about the game. They want to like engage with you. I was never good enough to play, but if I was, I would love to be able to have the opportunity, but I just never was a skilled player, despite being ranked 1 on NetEase.
Right.
But yeah, like just like I found myself in a position where I'm opening the door for players that would never have these opportunities to meet Loliet and meet like all these people just because of the connections I had through ZOTAC and eHOME. And it was cool. It was really cool. And being like the English speaking person, China at the time was always very like, we just want to play in China.
Yes.
We don't want to do ZOTAC Cup. I don't know what that is. We just want to do our thing. And they had G League, they had ECL, they had a bunch of stuff going on. But it was really like, it took like someone asking me, one of the replays.net editors, who was the actual head manager of eHOME at the time. He was like, hey man, all these players want to play ZOTAC. Can you help them? And I'm like, yeah. Or all these players want to learn about this WCO, which was Warcraft 3 Olympics. It was like a team league. And I was kind of like that liaison to like, yeah, man, you register here and like, holy crap, there's going to be E3, which was Blast, Wulin, all these good players joining this team league now. I don't know how they're going to handle the host, but this is cool. And then like TH was like, hey man, I want to play ZOTAC. Can you sign me up? And I'm like, holy crap, TH is going to splash this whole thing. Like, this is crazy. At the
time, what team are you managing? Because you mentioned you started managing a team before going to ZOTAC. At this time, when the Chinese are transferring over to these European and North American Cups, what team are you with right now?
I was probably with Rage.
With Rage.
Probably with Rage.
Who was on that roster?
So at the time when I joined, and then at the time it was Very Big Man, Bly. They picked up Ted.
Yeah.
And then Mac. And then I brought on the Asians, which was Loliet and Shishi.
Yeah.
And then I brought in Acid Rain and Long Walk.
Okay. Yeah.
And Duck. I don't think Duck played much with Rage because our lineup was really, really sick. But it was actually, I have the lineup.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll just read them.
Yeah.
So it was Very Big Man, Ted, Holy Human, Bly, Krav, Bosui, Blast, Demigod, who also came back, the Orc player. He was very good at the time too.
Right. Yeah.
And then so Rage merged with BOC. BOC was a Chinese clan. So BOC had GYY, Goblin, Shishi, and Una, Moon fans.
Yes. Yep.
So just like huge players. Evanescence from Kazakhstan, who was a really good elf player at the time.
He's still around. Yeah, he's still playing.
Yeah, he still plays. Yeah, just like a really, really sick lineup. And I think having Ted on the team, like I could just be like, oh, that's Ted's team. And everyone was talking about Rage in China because Ted left Gigabyte to come to Rage, which was like crazy. But he had a crazy contract, which I don't know how they even got the money for that. But I looked at it, it was fat.
This was pre WCG victory Ted as well.
This was
because that was 2012, I believe. Ted.
Oh yeah. This was before. Yeah, this is way before. This is like 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was on the team, and it was just crazy. So, what was the question?
Okay, yeah. So I was just wanting to get sort of a grounding. So you're pretty high profile at this point, and then you become this liaison for the Chinese to come over to the ZOTAC and these other leagues that you're doing, and that's sort of where you were. Was with the Chinese were sort of moving over, right?
Yeah, and then I would just get obsessed with like, I want Duck to be like a star, so I'm gonna give him practice with. I'm gonna have Moon and Loliet and Ted beat the crap out of him for 50 games.
Yeah.
And it's like a hyperbolic time chamber, I used to call it. Like, Doc, I'm going to put you through the hyperbolic time chamber. You're going to be like an insane player when you come out of it.
Yeah.
And I would get like obsessed with like, hey man, do you want custom games with like Moon and stuff like that? And yeah. And then So
The
I was on
observer
Rage
coming out in you. You want to just watch games again.
I wanted to just watch games. Yeah. And like I have the power to make my own matchups. Like I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I want Longwalk to play against like him. And like, you know, TH against Duck. Like this is crazy. This just all seems like a dream.
Yeah.
And so I was doing that. I was doing ZOTAC Cup. And what happened with Rage ended up actually, so I'm like 16 at the time, 16 years old. And me and Bly are pretty close at this time. Like Bly was one of those players that always messaged managers for help and stuff like that. And, you know, me, I was just always available. I looked at my phone for notifications every 25 minutes, every day. Like I was just obsessed, right? So if Bly messaged me, I answered him within the hour.
Right.
And he would be like, hey, Rage didn't pay me this month. Can you talk to the ownership? And I was like, oh, crap.
Right.
And at the time I was like, I knew how much he was making, and I was working at Subway sandwiches. And I go, you know what? I'll pay it for you. I'm going to pay your month's salary. I'm 16 years old paying Bly's salary. I only did it 1 month, and then they started paying him again.
Right. Yeah.
But like, this was just like the dedication I had. I was so obsessed to like, dude, if I'm going to be a manager, it's my responsibility too. Like I didn't sign the contract. It's not me. But like, I was just like, I don't want people to ever associate me with scummy behavior.
Yeah.
And
that
because
happens, this happened a lot in Warcraft. I'm sure you've experienced it a lot on different teams. Being a manager, not quite the owner, the person that pays the checks.
Not having any power. But I was so upset. Like I always flashed, I'm on Rage, look at me, right? So what kind of person would I be if I'm like taking all the credit for all Rage's success as a huge team, but then when shit hits the fan, I'm gonna turn the other way and say
that's that cake. Yeah.
That's that guy's problem. No. So I took my licks, and that kind of made me not want to be a part of the team anymore, because I was like, dude, this team's kind of falling apart. I don't really know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't want to be stuck in the situation where players are getting pissed. And if it happened once, that was my theory too. If a payment misses once, this is going to happen again. And at what magnitude? So yeah. And then that was when I was doing a lot of ZOTAC Cups. And the only player on eHOME at the time was Remind. Remind got picked up by eHOME. And
a total on top of the world god at this point too. This is like 2009,
winning every single ZOTAC Cup. If he didn't win it, Focus won it, but the finals were always Remind and Focus.
Yeah.
This is 2010.
Like first Korean to win WCG, higher rank than Moon.
Oh man, he was a superstar. Yeah. Remind was it at the time, and so eHOME picked him up alone. And I said, hey Remind, you know, I really just want to manage you. Can you help me get on eHOME? And he said, sure. So he directed me to the manager of eHOME at the time, who was just like a Replays.net. Replays.net was like a huge Chinese. It was like the WCR for China, but it was huge, and it was like the main editor. And I'm like, you're the head manager of eHOME? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, can I just be your assistant? I just want to be a part of this. And he's like, sure, I need the help. And it was crazy. And so I joined eHOME right away. That was when Ted went back to WeGigabyte. Bly went to Starcraft II. And this was like 2011,
when the Starcraft II was sort of picking off.
Was like start brewing. Beta, it was brewing. And then I joined eHOME, and that's when like I started really understanding, okay, this is like big time stuff. So they picked up Fly, Sai, S-A-I, who was a really good elf at the time, and Fly, Sai, and Yumiko. So they picked up these three players because a big team league was War 3 Champions League, which was on ESL, and it was like $5,000.
It was actually War 3 Champions League?
It was called War 3 Champions League.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it was a huge team league hosted by ESL, and it was always like $5,000 prize pool. And they picked up these four players because they needed four players for the lineup.
Yeah.
And this was at the end of 2010, and the last season went into the first 2 months of. So this was November of 2010. They picked these players out, or 2011.
Yeah. Maybe
2010. I don't know. But the season lasted until February of the next year, and they're like, good, we're going to have this power lineup. Fly, Remind, Sei, and Yumiko.
Yeah.
And then we're going to win all this stuff. So I was like, holy crap, I'm going to have a superstar lineup to beat Serious Gaming. I think it was MYM, Mouse Sports at the time, all these pro teams, right? So I was like, holy crap. And then War 3 Champions League didn't renew.
Right.
And it was like, oh, well, that was anticlimactic. I wanted to like actually win a team league title when they were important, when they were still relevant.
When that's the reason that pro teams were existing, was for
I'm
team
literally
leagues.
like, dude, all of this work, all of these observing games, following this pro, made it to Rage. I'm managing TED. This is all a dream. I'm now on EHOME, which was a huge Dota team.
Yeah.
And they're a huge Warcraft 3.
Are they still around, eHOME?
I think they like
maybe
scam their players or something.
Oh, okay. As most
there was a huge scandal way later, but I'm like, I've done it. Like I've finally made it. This is so cool. And then I didn't get there was no more team leagues, and that was like the dive end of Warcraft 3 when but there was still so much to do. So I would have to coordinate like all these players practice. I would have to tell them all the events they're playing in, which is like G League, ECL. And these are like good solo leagues in China. Like people, first place is like $3,000. So these are important. Which was pretty cool to do. And then I think I got the inkling, which maybe I got too big for my bridges, but I was like, I want to start like actually getting into like negotiating, and I want to like help market these players, and I want to like start, because like they're doing everything. I saw Remind was every Saturday winning ZOTAC. That's all they talked about. Fly and Sai and Yumiko were always like top 4 at the G Leagues, the ECLs. I'm like, we need to expand and be bigger. You know what I mean? Because we need to take advantage. And then I ended up going to 71, who was like the eHOME owner.
Yeah. And
I was like, I just want more. I want more power. I need more like ability to like market these guys. And he was just no.
Right.
And I think it was maybe because I was a foreigner. I honestly do. I think he even said like, you can't like be in the negotiations because they don't speak English. I didn't speak Chinese. Yeah. But they didn't want me like involved in anything except for like assisting. And that's when I got like, dude, I just want to, and then I was like, why am I asking permission? I should just make my own team.
Right.
If I make my own team, I know how to manage. I know how to do all this. I could play or develop. I want to get into the marketing thing. I hate asking for permission. I don't want to ask for permission. And that's when me and Dreams made Dust Gaming, which was 2012. So this was like the end of 2011. And then in 2012, we just made Dust Gaming. And it was always like, dude, we're just going to do it our way. It's going to be great. And then StarCraft II was the big hype. So Warcraft 3 was kind of nosediving. And I was like, I'd love to take my skills to StarCraft 2, because StarCraft 2, honestly, 2011, 2012 was like the pinnacle of gaming.
Right.
And that's why I made the switch, because all these teams like EG, Complexity, Fnatic, Dignitas, all these huge orgs were all moving, and there was nothing in Warcraft 3 anymore.
And there was a lot of other stuff. That was when Global Offensive, Counter-Strike came out. I think that's around when Dota 2 was coming out. I'm not 100% sure on the date on that. And then obviously StarCraft 2. But those two, Counter-Strike and StarCraft 2.
But StarCraft 2 was huge. So all these tournaments were like 20 grand, 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand. The team leagues were like huge money, tons of viewership. Everyone was getting in on it. Kiwi Kaki came back. All these like stars, Bly came to StarCraft 2. All these Warcraft 3 legends, Stefano, who wasn't very successful in Warcraft 3, was hugely successful in StarCraft 2. Violet, of course, as well.
Yeah.
All came to StarCraft 2, and it was like a no-brainer. It seemed like, well, all my friends are going there anyway, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's when we started the StarCraft 2 thing in 2020 or 2012, and that's when ZOTAC. I kind of stepped away from ZOTAC. I think it ran for a bit longer, but not very long.
Another 6
yeah,
months
another year and stuff like that. But they were getting pushback from Game Sports about like, hey, we're going to be shutting this down soon.
Yeah. G Arena was getting shut down around there too, if I remember correct, because that was right around the time when War 3 Arena was being released. So I think Garena was gone relatively soon after that.
Yeah, it was, at least the servers you couldn't connect anymore.
Yeah.
One day you just couldn't connect to Garena. It was just dead. Yeah, and I think maybe NetEase had a plan in that, because I think NetEase came out after and they kind of shut them down. I don't know. Maybe just Garena just shut down. I have no idea.
NetEase was about 2015, I think. Maybe 2014 late, but around 2015. So it could have been tied, yeah.
Maybe Garena was there in 2014 as well.
Yeah.
maybe. I'm not too sure.
Yeah,
But
that's around those couple of years at least. Yeah.
yeah, they're definitely connected because one superseded the other, obviously. But yeah, so yeah.
And you're in Warcraft and Starcraft at the same time, right? For at least a year or something like that.
Yeah, so I made this one team which was Ruin Esports. This was before I talked to Tom. And this was like I basically took all the players that were like Rage Dissolved, and I took Loliet and Shishi and Longwalk and Duck and who was also on Rage, and he agreed to come on too. Yeah. And then that lasted for like 2 months. And then who was like, I don't want to play the game anymore. I'm going to retire.
Yeah.
There was a huge Korean team, Tempest, and they picked up Lunatic. Oh, I had Soin and Lunatic as well. Really good Koreans. But there was this huge team named Tempest, and they signed Loliet, Soin, and Lunatic to like big money. And I was like, well, I can't pay anything. I'm like a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old. I got no money. Go take it and go. Right. So right away I lost all the Korean powerhouse, and then I was left with just like nobody else that wanted to like participate, because I was kind of riding off them to just carry the momentum. So that shut down really quickly. So then I just wanted, when I made Dust, I was like, you know what, I could do both. I can do Warcraft 3 on the side, and then I could do Starcraft 2 full time. And that's when we had our Warcraft 3 roster where you came in, a bunch of other people came in. Our team was pretty stacked. I think I asked Yaz if he wanted to play, and he's like,
pretty crazy when I was first, because I had only played for, this is 2012 about when I joined. I had played for 2 years. I had known you for about 6 months before joining Dust. So I met you in probably like early 2012, and mid 2012 was when I joined. And like I've played for 2 years, and I'm on a team with like Yaz and Sokol and Fly and TED. Like if you look it up, you can find like the archive of that roster, and I'm on there at the bottom, and at the top is like Fly and TED. It's completely ridiculous.
It was sick. I don't know what we were gonna play, but all these guys were just down to play, because this was like in the Warcraft 3 times where there was just nothing to do. There was ZOTAC was winding down. There was like occasional cups, but people just wanted to believe that like if we gathered together, we can build something. So the team was sick. When I talked to Yaz about joining, I was like, "Do you want to join this team?" And he's like, "Who's on it?" And I'm like, "TH." And he's like, "Yes."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Sick."
Yeah.
Like we got Yaz. This is insane. But I don't think we really did anything with that team.
It was just sort of a roster, I think, right? Because there was no leagues anymore, or like none that they were playing in, at least, really.
Yeah, and then the Warcraft 3 team just kind of fizzled out, and then we just went dedicated full-time Starcraft 2 for the next 6 years. Yeah.
So how did that translate into Starcraft 2? So you're like a pretty successful Warcraft manager. You have the top players there. A couple of them switch over to Starcraft, but obviously not the majority. They're still playing Warcraft even today. How do you get into a position where you can recruit talent in Starcraft 2? And what sort of level of talent were you recruiting at the beginning of Dust and Starcraft?
Truth is, man, when I built Dust, I was like, I'm going to ride this fame I have from Warcraft 3. I can talk to anybody in the world. I'm a Superman. When I got into Starcraft 2, dude, nobody gave a shit.
Yeah.
Nobody gave a shit. All the players that, I used to hang out with were all signed to huge teams. They were doing marketing stuff. They were too busy to even talk to me.
Right.
I had no connections in Starcraft 2. They disappeared, which kind of sucked because I had to restart.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it didn't help me at all. None of that mattered. ZOTAC adminning didn't matter. EHOME didn't matter. None of it mattered at all, which was kind of like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
But yeah, we grinded. I think the premise was like, we're going to build this grassroots team. We're going to pick up diamond players, which at the time you could relate are diamond on War 3 Champions now. Diamond players.
Yes.
And we're going to grow them into GMs, and we're going to market them, and they're all young kids, and we're just going to build a team that, from the ground up, like Leicester City soccer team. They're all just unknown players, but they win the championship.
This is really interesting then. So we were talking a little bit earlier on the sort of eye for talent in watching, you said 33,000 and, Warcraft games, and then moving on to adminning ZOTAC and probably watching another 33,000. But you go into a new game like Starcraft, I imagine you didn't play. You just liked watching and managing. How do you sort of translate that eye for talent into finding people in Starcraft? What is your process for finding people? Because you did, I'm sure, find, if I remember correct, some successful players in the end of all that.
Yeah, we definitely did. Starcraft 2 was easier than Warcraft 3, to be honest with you. The no heroes helped. It was really just build economy and build an army, and you could see it. You could see who's got good macro or who's taking an edge really quickly. I found it was a lot easier than Warcraft 3. So I would
you
pick
can sort
up
of
these,
quantify it and do like a number. Like he's got more supply, and it's so early into the game, he's double
and
this
it's
guy's
faster.
supply.
You know, they did the same build, but this guy's like 20 seconds ahead visually. So it was a lot easier to see like, oh, this guy's good, or this guy's got something.
Yeah.
So it was really easy, and I picked up some good players that I'm still friends with today, and they were really around for the whole 6 years, and it was good. So most of them went from Diamond to GM, and then we started to I just idolized, man. I again the obsession to become one of these teams, like watching EG go to an event. My first event was MLG Rally in 2012, and just watching these guys show up, and they're honestly like they're just gods. It was like the Muslim, In Control, all these just Idra, all these superstars, and you just like fall in love, man. And they do like radio shows. I would watch everything they said, and I just wanted that. I wanted that for me in Starcraft II.
I'd like to hover on that a little bit. That first LAN that you went to, who went there off your roster with you to that first LAN?
There was a few. There was a few. Yeah, it was me, a kid named Mitch, Gray, Crusha. There was a bunch of us. Yeah, there was a lot of us.
And this is just an open bracket. You can just sign up and play.
Open bracket, yeah. And this was back when, like, dude, if MLG was on, there was like 300 people there. It was huge.
Yeah.
Huge signups. They had like 256 player brackets, and they were usually full.
Right.
But yeah, we had a huge lineup. So a bunch of them lived in that area, so they could fly themselves. Yeah. I think I flew 2 players myself. Beast and SWS, I think.
Yep.
And then there was a bunch of us. I think like 8 of us. And so this was the first time, my first event, I get to actually meet some of these players. So
probably a lot of their first events too, right? Most of the players.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Huge. Yeah. So it was cool though, because I see Violet, players that I knew from Warcraft 3 and Bly, and I say hi to them and stuff like that. I actually had Violet. So one of the players, the youngest player, the 13-year-old, was a Zerg. He was a huge fan of Violet.
Right.
And nobody knew that I knew Violet. So I just walked up to Violet and I was like, hey man, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And then I go, can you just go up to that kid? His ID is Greyhan, and just say like, hey, I saw your stream. I'm a huge fan of yours. And obviously Violet didn't know.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, sure, no problem.
But Violet's a good guy. He's a really
Violet's
good guy.
A great guy. Yeah. Class act. He walks up to the guy and he goes, are you Greyhan? I watch your stream. And this kid, 13, is like shaking.
Yeah.
So he's like, thank you. I hope, like, and then he comes back to us and he's like, dude, Violet watches my stream. And that's, dude, his tournament was made.
Yeah.
He didn't even want to play anymore. He's like, dude, Violet watches my stream. Like, what are you going to do? And he kind of got cocky with it too. Violet, does Violet watch your stream? Like, that became like a meme.
Yeah.
But it was like 13, right? But yeah, it was crazy, man. It was super fun. But again, just like this, I want to be on the next level. Like, because complexities and EGs, you didn't know this, but while we're trying to fly to the event and compete, MLG's flying them out.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, they're like, we're running an event. We need Idra, we need Huck, we need this. They're paying for their flights, their hotels, the event itself.
The marketable players, they're flying out, to touch on the point from earlier. They're to get the eyes on the event, because it's all about eyes on the product.
Eyes on the event, right? So like imagine that level. I mean, I was never on that level, but I hungered. I wanted that so bad. Like that's just like, that's fame on a different level to me. That was like, you guys are just on a different level, But the joy in this for me was like, dude, imagine beating one of these guys.
Right.
Dude, imagine beating one of these guys. Imagine one of my players gets to play him and beats him in a best 3, knocks him out.
Yeah.
That's my goal now, because the splash I can generate from that would be huge.
Yes.
Yeah. And it happened. It happened in IEM New York. It was just me and SWS, was just a Protoss player at the time.
Was this the second event you've been to then?
Second event, yeah. So this was 2014 in New York, and SWS first round he gets Snoot. Snoot was really good at the time, or no, Dongrigu. He gets Dongrigu, but the bracket changes and he ends up getting DeMuslim last minute.
Okay.
And DeMuslim tweets before the event, "What am I supposed to do against Protoss cheese?" So SWS goes, "I'm gonna cheese him.
Right.
I'm gonna proxy void ray him and proxy gate him. It's gonna be hilarious." And he does it 2 games in a row and beats DeMuslim.
Right.
And that was like the craziest feeling, because the EG players, there's like Suppy, Idra, In Control behind DeMuslim. There's me behind this player.
Yeah.
And like they're in a best of 3, and I'm looking at them. They're looking at me. I got the Dust shirt on, they got the EG stuff on, and like it was a 2-1, I think. And it was just crazy. Like we just like the whole team went nuts. DeMuslim had something to say about it, but then he wasn't too happy. But yeah, because he got cheese, right?
Yeah.
But
which is a much bigger reality in StarCraft and Warcraft. It's a legitimate way of playing the game in StarCraft is to cheese.
It was huge, yeah. Especially and to tweet like before the tournament, probably ill-advised because he ended up getting a Protoss.
You would think it would be a mind game from that. Like he would be really good against cheese. He would love it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. No, he messed up. He couldn't do it.
Are you like advising this sort of stuff when SWS is like, I'm going to cheese him? Are you talking to him before the match about this? Are you saying, dude, he might be mind gaming you? He might be have watched your replays and be ready for cheese?
Absolutely. So we talked about this. I'm like, dude, I don't. So the reason I said it might be a trick because I'm always thinking glass half empty, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And he goes, no. I've actually seen his replays. Like he can't beat Protoss cheese. I'm going to do this build. And actually the build I'm going to do is proxy gateway, stalker, double stalker into Void Ray. And then you attack the bunker on the hill, on the ramp.
Yep.
And he's like, I know what to do. I've done it before. Like I can beat him with this. And he did it twice and beat him. And the second game, DeMuslim actually had like a sick hold, but he still broke it. It was insane. It was kind of broken. I don't blame DeMuslim for whining about it, but like that was our biggest achievement.
Yeah.
Was just beating this one player at this event one time. And obviously DeMuslim went farther into the tournament through the losers bracket and SWS got knocked out. But it was just like this feeling of like for one moment, one time, we were competitive. Like Dust had a splash at the event. And that was like the greatest feeling. I remember just being like so happy. I like called my dad and I was like, we beat DeMuslim. And he's like,
what are you talking about?
No, he goes, how much money did you win?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, the tournament's still going. We didn't win any money. And he's like, oh. And I'm like, you don't understand. This is huge. And he's like, oh, all right. And he's like, so are you into the next round? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, how many players are left? I'm like, 64. And he's, you know what I mean? But like, he didn't get, I was like, you don't understand though. We beat DeMuslim. You don't understand. Yeah, it was crazy. And then, yeah, just like continued doing stuff like that. And then eventually, over time, I started to learn a bit more about marketability and social media and advertising. And I ended up talking to this guy who hooked me up with TT Esports. So he was working as a marketing director for TT Esports.
Okay.
And I sent him like
it's a Chinese peripheral company, right? Keyboards, mice, computer fans, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, stuff like that, right? So they picked up a few teams as well for like marketing, but they were huge. They were like huge teams.
Yeah.
I think one of the teams was like Immortals was like on there, just like huge, right? So I'm like, what the hell? But we were talking for a bit, and he was like, yeah, I love what you and Dust are doing. Can you send me like a marketing package? So I was like, marketing package? I've never really done that before. So
we beat DeMuslim. What else do I need?
Well, we beat DeMuslim though. Is that cool? And it wasn't cool. They want like an actual marketing plan. So
again, back to the Twitter. The results don't matter. It's good for it feels good, but Twitter, stuff like that.
Man, results don't matter. Build marketability. So we basically built this marketing deck, and at the time, everyone was just doing PowerPoint. I was like, no, I don't want to be like them. I'm going to build like a website presentation. It's going to be a website. You click a website, and it's just going to be like on a web page. That's so professional. And I got that from Complexity. Actually, was watching their marketing thing. I don't even know how I ended up getting that information. I hacked the mainframe or something.
Right.
But I was like, I love this approach. So I did that, and everyone was like, whoa, this is like sick. And then, yeah, we landed a peripheral deal in StarCraft II for a bunch of GMs that are like rank 180, rank 140. They got like 200 followers. Some of them had like 200 followers on Twitter and were sponsored by like a huge company. And they actually gave us stuff. We would run Dust League. You still got it? Yeah, Carson got the mouse bungee.
And here's my mouse pad. Very old at this point.
I'm still using the mouse, dude. I'm still using. Look at that. That's like 5 years later.
And
that's
I wasn't even on
hilarious.
the StarCraft team. We were still just friends from the Warcraft team, but at this point too, I was not involved in StarCraft at all. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
No, that's really cool. So like they gave us peripheral, and we had a way of like recruiting better players. And look, we have like a sponsorship. We actually have a company backing us. It was crazy. So like just learning like the business end, social media, obviously we had a contract with them. We had to tweet and do unboxing videos and do all this stuff.
Yes.
And that I got a bigger grasp for like, holy crap, like we can actually become big without winning anything at all.
Yes.
We don't have to have to practice anymore. Just tweet.
Yeah.
Which was a weird concept for me in like 2015. But yeah, it was just
so that was your sort of introduction to what we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's why I always stand by, listen, guys, like think outside the game. You can market yourself, become a brand, and there's options there for you. You don't have to win a dream hack. Yes. Absolutely not. You don't ever have to win anything. And I stand by that because I experienced that.
Yeah, you don't have to beat J-Dong or Flash, whoever was top in SC2.
We didn't even have to beat the Muslim, to be honest with you.
It didn't even matter.
It didn't even matter. Yeah. So yeah. And so it just like over those 6 years, it just, taught me a lot about marketing, and I was taking business meetings as a young kid. I think 2014 was 7 years ago. I was 20 years old, a team owner. I was flying players out. I was, paying salaries if needed to be. I was doing social media. I was handling everything because Tom at the time, when he made the team with me, he was too busy with work, and he disappeared pretty quickly. And
so
then
no
it was
coach,
just me.
no nothing. You're doing everything.
I was managing, owning, coaching, marketing, social media, everything. I was dust gaming for a long time. There was some other assistants I had, like Jay. Jay came on and he helped out with a lot of stuff. And then, but for the most part, it was me for a long time. It was a lot of work, but I couldn't trust people because like some people would tweet and they would have spelling errors,
right?
And I'm like, dude, no. Like I just became like, dude, I'll just do it myself. And then I came used to like, I'll do it myself, and it's fine. It's and plus I was spending so much time anyway that just do the work anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
But then something happened where, it was like 2017, 2018. We were kind of losing our mojo to play the game. The players that were 20 6 years ago were now 26, and they need careers and they don't have time to play anymore. They're not kids anymore, right? I too, like, I started to get a career going, and I didn't have much time. But then, yeah, it just started, and then I was left with all these mid 20 to 30-year-olds that don't want to play StarCraft II anymore.
But still
and
want
I'm like,
something.
No, not for they kind of wanted to walk away. They're done. They've had their run, right? And it was a good run.
Yeah.
And then I kind of said, like, do I want to restart and look for the next 18-year-old kid now,
right,
and do this all over again? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to go back to Warcraft 3. And that's when you messaged me and you're like, you want to come back to the game? And I said, you know what? I think it's time. And
so this is November 2018, I believe.
Yeah, so this is 2018.
So
and
6 years
I
in StarCraft. You did 3 years in the ZOTAC and the hosting and the watching games. You go to StarCraft in 2012, around 6 years in there. Now we're November 2018.
Yeah, so in 2016 we landed TT Esports. In 2017 or 2015, and then 2017 I talked to them because they were kind of like giving us less but asking more.
Yes.
And I was like, no, that's not going to work. And then they were like, well, this is how we're going to do it now. And I was like, okay, I think we're far apart. So we didn't renew with them anymore.
Yeah.
Great company to work with, though. They just had a different vision 2 years later, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
Things change. But yeah, and then it was getting to the point where I didn't want to restart. I didn't want to, and StarCraft II was kind of fading. And there was this hope of, the game that I lived in and grew up on might be coming back.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? I can come back. And what also really made me want to go is, and this is like huge for me, is I never, all those years, ZOTAC admin, Rage, EHOME, I never had a place in NA.
Right.
I never had a place. I would always hang out with the guys, but I was never really liked or respected. Or they had SC, which was Fade's team, and they had ONU, which was Yash's team.
Yes.
And those two really ran the scene in NA for a long time. They did a great job doing it. Yash was one of the hardest working guys ever. But this like comeback in 2018 was me, like, they were gone now, and like I could come in and finally have a shot at growing NA my way. And then you were like, let's do it together. And, we're great friends. And I was like, this seems right. It just seems like the right place to do and nice thing to do. And I could finally have my take at NA. And
there could finally be a team that was NA, I think was the premise, right? Because there was always ONU was, of course, famously European as well. It had Entei and Juan, and I'm sure a lot of other
Yes.
Europeans at the time.
And I'm so glad we stuck to that. You know what? Let's not pick up a superstar because we probably could have. But I'm so glad we stuck to NA because I think
when we
it's
say
just,
NA, by the way, we mean North America, South America, and Oceania. Just to be
right.
clear.
Whoever was basically on East server at the time.
Yes.
East or West, you know, is what we based it on because yeah, there is different. NA is obviously North America, but there are regions that unite with them too.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it was the right call, and it was really cool. It was like, you know what, I'm coming back to the game I love, the game I have the most passion for, and I get to be a part of the region I was never really a part of. So it was like a full circle.
Right. So how many of these players now, like how did you have connections with these players? The guys that didn't go over to Starcraft II, you knew them somewhat in like your 2009 days of hosting, you know, East custom games and stuff, you know, 1v1 pro obs. How many of these players have you actually managed before, or do you just know them from sort of like 10 years ago?
You're talking about the Dust Warcraft 3 guys now?
The Dust guys.
Honestly,
how did you
very
actually
few.
know them?
Very few. Okay. I worked with Pride, Duck, and Longwalk.
Okay.
That's it. Recruiting Cruncher, OC, Hitman, these were all new to me. Obviously, Hitman was a huge StarCraft II star.
Yes.
In NA. So talking to him made me a little nervous, but no, all this was so new to me. Boo, I didn't know him.
Yes.
We met him at the event. Obviously,
Deuce.
Arc, I didn't know him. Deuce, I didn't know him. And these were Deuce, I knew.
Okay.
I would say Deuce, Rebuke, Acid Rain. Deuce, Rebuke, Acid Rain, Longwalk, Duck, and Pride were the 6 players I definitely knew a lot of. The other ones I did not know. FK was always ONU with Yosh.
Yeah,
he was always dedicated. Yes. He was always dedicated to Yosh. I'm sure he's been poached a lot, but he always said no. So asking him to join was a big deal for me because I know he was so dedicated to ONU at the time. Yosh obviously wasn't around anymore, so I was basically, you know, picking, you know, bits of SC, bits of ONU, and then the players that I normally had, which was Acid Rain and Longwalk, who were on Rage with me and worked with me before. So yeah, it was easy to recruit, but it was also kind of nerve-wracking because Cruncher has no reason to come onto this team at the time. OC has no reason to come on this team at the time.
It's amazing to think that we barely knew them when Dust started, right? Like, because I for sure didn't know them at all. I'd never spoken to any of these people. But
yeah,
you,
I
sure
only
you
watched them. I only like when I watched Cruncher win that ZOTAC Cup
Mm-hmm.
against Focus 3-2. I didn't know him at all. That was a long time ago. But yeah, OC I was always a fan of. Obviously, he's the first like pro that I saw.
He was on Majawi. I actually found out when I was doing some research for this. It's an incredible team. That's a good thing.
Yeah, Gab and Majawi. He had a really good team. Yeah. He was always on good teams. But yeah, like these were players that, you know, even coming back now, 2018 after everything, I was like, these guys still like kind of intimidate me when I'm talking to them.
Yeah,
because they're the old boys that I used to idolize. You know, so it was like, if they say yes, like, holy crap, this is huge.
Yeah.
And I think we got OC first or Cruncher first, and then one of them got the other one.
Yeah, right.
I forget if was it OC first and then no, I think it was Cruncher and then Cruncher brought OC.
I'm trying to remember. I'm not too sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was we got Cruncher first, and then Cruncher was the one that brought OC, and then Arc and Shade joined later as streamers, and then Arc obviously just blew up into this huge dynamite player that he is today.
Yeah, Arc, one of the players that wasn't actually established, but is now as a North American player, very, very well established. Definitely, you know.
Definitely, yeah.
Approaching
and when he joined,
consistently,
he was never supposed to be in the lineups. He was supposed to just be a streamer, because we wanted to get back into the marketing. Like, let's grow something here with Dust, right? So, yeah, really cool the way he's grown up and become a better player. But yeah, that's basically been my run.
Did you sort of have a favorite player ever for all these regions in North America, Europe, and Asia, now having managed all 3 regions in both, I'm sure, StarCraft? I'm sure you had some Europeans and some Asians as well. Did you have a favorite player in Warcraft for these regions?
Probably TH.
TH overall. What about North America of all time?
North America of all time? I've worked the most with Longwalk.
Yes, great guy. Great guy.
He is a great guy. I wish he lived in America. We could do so much more with him. Greatest of all time to ever work with in NA? Hitman.
Hitman. Yeah.
Hitman 100%. Just like, He's always active, always engaging. We work together a lot actually behind the scenes. I'm always trying to help him out with stuff. I enjoy the memes. And yeah, definitely the most fun I've ever had managing someone was definitely Hitman.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Who's the most marketable though? Was he the most marketable as well, you think? I would almost say, from my experience, I would almost say OC might be the most marketable for everyone, because he's not only can he play the game and he gets results when he does play, but he also, you know, he's very memeable. He's very memeable, and everyone knows his face.
Victor's been doing this weird thing where his stream, he doesn't do anything, but people watch it, people engage, and that's the most powerful branding ever. The fact that just your name is bringing people in your gameplay,
that's all it takes. It's just
that's
Hitman.
Crazy. If he actually dedicated any effort, he would be huge. Huge streamer. But you know, he's most comfortable doing this. I don't want to rock the boat with the way he handles his stream, but yeah, OC's definitely marketable. Cruncher, when he wants to be, is definitely marketable. There's a lot, I think. Most marketable, Victor, Hitman, obviously.
Yes, because he has the big name. He's getting to the point in North America where you mentioned earlier he's got the name like Grubby or Moon. Not at that level, of course, but he is the North American version of that, where everyone sees his name and I want to watch that guy. If he's in a tournament, I want to follow him through the grid the whole time, right?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just like you said, he's got that wow factor. So, and that can hurt him too, because everyone's so critical in this game.
Yes.
If you lose a best of 3, you're slumping all of a sudden. If you win a best of 3, you're God and the other person's slumping.
Yes.
And that's why this cross server is very iffy. And I understand his point of view. You know, he prefers better ping. And when you're playing at the top level, it does matter. And I understand that you don't get, it's not a true fair shake unless it's LAN. And I hope people understand that. You know, it's great that Hitman beat Focus and Thunder the other day to take first in his group. That's great, but we don't look at that as like we're the best now. LAN settles that, and LAN will always settle that in Warcraft 3 until there's a better alternative, which I don't think there will be. The regions are pretty locked. The servers, the pings are going to be what they are. So I think I'm upset that, you know, ESL's not offline. I think we were seeing probably the best Hitman we might see, and now that he's working, maybe we lose some of that for next year's LAN. I don't know. Maybe he can balance and find a way to keep it up. But I think we really missed out on what could potentially be, you know, Hitman's best shot at LAN this year.
Yeah.
But if he keeps it up, I mean, Jesus, this guy's remarkable.
Yes, absolutely. What is it about him? Because you're now in a position, we got to 2018, Hitman joins, and now Hitman, of course, 3 years later is one of the best players in the entire world. For the first time in North America, with the exception of a few, you know, short round, of course, players like that. What has separated him from the other players in North America that were undoubtedly talented, but never really could reach that top? What is different about him?
So there's a lot of players that I've worked with in Starcraft, Warcraft 3 that just they grow so quickly. And it's a weird saying in a video game. What do you mean they grow?
Right.
There's a lot of players that mass games.
Yes.
Okay, Victor Hitman is one of those players that masses games. I've never looked at massing games as a method of getting better. You can play 1,000 games and still be the same level. You could play 1,000 games and be really good. You could play 1,000 games and get worse.
Yes.
So I never really looked at that. It's how you utilize the time in game, and he is one of the best that I've ever seen. His analysis. The way he looks at replays and the way, like, every game he's working at developing a timing or developing a goal. And if it gets stuck in any way, if it gets beaten anyway, he changes it on the fly. He goes, you know what? That's not ideal.
That little detail.
That little detail ruined the whole idea. I'm changing it up, and I'm trying a new, and you know, it's helped him. He's grinded a lot of games. He's broken through these humps, and he's been able to fix the holes.
Yes.
And he's become into like this optimal player that wins 86% of the games. I mean, whatever his win rate is.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter who he's playing, because his builds with his micro, it just equals up to his opponent has to play good.
Yes.
His opponent has to play outside the box. And I think that's what makes him so scary, is that it doesn't even matter on paper if it's TH versus Hitman.
Mm-hmm.
If TH doesn't play the matchup properly, Hitman will win.
That's a great point. That's a great. He doesn't necessarily play the player always. He plays the strategy and he plays it perfectly, like, and it's all calculated. He knows what's going to happen.
Nobody else is really doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the top players have already done that over the years. There's a Fly, got to be Fly, and TH got to be TH.
Yes.
And the level and the speed at which he's able to do this is incredible.
Yes.
That's what I see that separates him is just, Deuce plays almost the same amount of games, and Deuce is getting better, but he's not improving at the speed that he should be.
Yes, at least not the speed that Hitman improved, which was 1 year from top NA to top world.
Right. And I mean, 2018 Hitman in China is nowhere close to the 2021 Hitman we see today.
No.
It's just that's the big difference, I think. It's just his level of looking at games, analyzing them, and actually making changes, not being stubborn, not sticking to, like, the races imbalance or stupid excuses. Those have always just been excuses to me. If anyone says that, because I've always said, if someone says undead's broken, it's like, no, man. There's been an undead at the top of the world all the time. A human, an elf, an orc at the top level of all time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it doesn't matter about the matchup so much. If your ability's better, you're going to win.
Yeah.
Someone that abuses dots as an elf player in NA, like if Longwalk played dots, right, against Fly, it's not like he's going to necessarily win just because he's playing dots.
Yes.
He still has to
under
make it work,
the
right?
assumption that you're making that under the assumption that dots are broken.
Right, exactly. If you're thinking like, I can't be dots, right?
Yes.
Well, that's not true, because if Hitman does dots against Lin, he might lose. You know what I mean? There's still a level of skill that you can reach to get past the matchups that are harder, not broken, harder. So I think anyone that says, like, the race is imbalanced, that, I can't win, it's really just an excuse. And I try not to say that on my streams. There are matchups that I play that are difficult to beat, but I see that they are beatable.
Yes.
And it's my ability that stopped me from winning. I need to work on this. And I think a lot of players don't look at the game like that. Hitman does.
Yes.
Hitman looks at it as like, you know what, I lost, but if I change this up like this, maybe I don't. And like we talked about, he's constantly chipping away, filling the holes. He's got a cocking gun, and he's just filling in the holes of all these matchups, all these maps, and becoming this optimal player where, you're playing the map and the race, not the player anymore. And you have these builds that are just in place that, even TH has to play a perfect game against Hitman, or he will lose. He will lose, and he has lost. So to look at the game like that is incredible. And he's so young, man.
Yeah, you've made so many good points there. I don't even know what to touch on first. I think first is sort of the idea that people will blame balance on things, even though they're a really good player. And I think what Hitman does is, although everyone memes on balance, of course, I meme on balance. And, when I play, I do feel imbalance, because that's what's going on in my head is, oh, it's imbalanced, that's why I'm losing. But in fact, that's not true. When really maybe that hump that Hitman's gotten over, because he's said in the past, oh, my micro isn't better than the average player. The micro isn't what's winning me games. Strategy is, but I think also the idea that you bring up of the strategy changing because he's willing to change it and not just leaning on it's imbalanced, I'm not going to change anything. I think getting over that hump of balance whining, you might say, it might actually be what's gotten Hitman to this point. Just that small little hump of I won't complain, I will adapt and change and sort of overcome, I guess you could say.
It's the strongest mindset ever. And you see this mindset with this kid because he plays so many games. Just that mindset alone, like to play 50 games a day every day, you're obviously not tilting. And I think that's because he's accepted that his losses are beneficial.
Yes.
Every loss I take isn't going to deter me. It's going to push me to get, like, he's actually gaining a Zenkai boost from his losses, like DVC reference. You know what I mean? Like, he's one of the only players that really thinks like that, because a lot of players will just lose. I'm done for the day. I'm tilted. I'm rattled. He's losing and going, something new to work on, baby. Back to the drawing board. I got a new project, and it's crazy to have a guy grinding at that level. That's why I'm so excited about it, because I don't know what level this kid can get to at this point. When you have those ingredients, it's like, what's the limit?
And he's
Where's
still
the
making
sky?
changes. I was talking to him this week about changes he was making against human, things he just thought of within the last month that he's making changes to his game with now. Like there's still changes. And I think you make another good point there. There was an interview I was watching with Elige, who people may know from Counter-Strike. He's a Team Liquid. He's one of the top players in the world. They were #1 team in the world, but he's also a Starcraft
I
player.
met him. I met him before he was a CS god.
Yeah, he was a Starcraft.
He was a
player
Starcraft II player. Yeah, I met him. Yeah, he's a super nice guy.
Yeah, and he said something where he said, because in Counter-Strike,
little name drop flex there.
You know, you go to Starcraft lands, you meet people. He said that because in Counter-Strike there's sort of, you know, first to 16 rounds. So every time you die in a round, you have time to reflect on what you did wrong in that individual round, which is different from Warcraft, where it's an individual game, and then when the game's over, you've already lost. But when the round's over, you haven't lost the game. So tilting after losing one of those rounds can be detrimental to the rest of the rounds and lose you the game overall. So in Counter-Strike, it's very important to have a good mental game. And what Elige said is when he loses in a round, essentially dies to something he shouldn't have, he, instead of thinking like, oh, that person's stupid, oh, that gun's imbalance that they're using, oh, you know, that shouldn't have happened, that was unlucky, he instead thinks, what did I do wrong? That's the first thing he immediately tells himself to think about. What did I do wrong? What can I do better so that doesn't happen again next time? He clouds everything else out of his head. Was that imbalance? Was that stupid? Did this person make a suboptimal play they shouldn't have? He cuts all that out of his head and instead just says, what did I do wrong? What can I do better next time? And then he moves that on. I think that's one of the strongest like mental exercises I've heard anyone mention, at least sort of, you know, forwardly, I guess you could say.
And if you look at it that way, then you're building this archive in your head of, if this happens in the game, how do I adjust? And okay, I can, this happens, it's putting me down a bit, but is there a way to win out? You know, like if I lose my lightning shield creep at the Merc camp, do I lose? You know what? I could switch it up. I can creep the shop, or I can creep the expo, and I can turn this around because this happened. Or I crept out the Merc camp beautifully, so let's stick to plan A.
Yes.
This is all working out. Like, Hitman has this archive of knowledge, and it's basically just, in this scenario X, I'm either going to continue with X or I'm going to change it to Y.
Yes.
And he has all these, it's almost like a tree of like, this is Echo Isles versus human, right? And he just like, this is the way the plan works. Okay, deviate. You know, this worked out. I'm going to stick to the plan, deviate here. All this happened. And he has this network map in his head. And that's what makes him so scary, is that even when you get an edge and you're burrow rushing him and it looks like you're going to win, for some reason, he just knows, just keep building grunts and Shadow Hunter and Serpent Ward, and I'm going to hold this.
Yeah, that's exactly how I picture it in my head too, is that tree that sort of goes out. That's 100% how I've pictured it.
Like a web map, right? Of just all these ideal situations and how to optimally get out of them. Yeah, and when you have a player like this, it's crazy to think of what are the limits, because he's not getting deterred by the game. The only thing I have to do as a team manager, as, you know, one of the people that take care of him, is keep the motivation alive. Keep the motivation alive.
Just let him do his thing for
let him do his thing. I'm not, it's working. It works. It's a good system. My job is just to make him not burn out, keep him healthy, I guess, you know, sleep better, which he doesn't listen to me anyway, but keep the motivation, because if he can keep this ride going, the sky's the limit, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, I'm really interested to almost hear his thoughts on this, because he almost arrived at this Zen sort of point of view where I've learned so much from him. Like, he's almost my coach. I'm the coach of Dust Gaming, but Hitman really is, he's taught me most things I know about at least Orc at this point in a lot of other matchups. But I don't know how he went from cheesing in StarCraft II every game, which is what he did, to having this solid mental game and just this way of thinking about Warcraft that is just so method-based and just based in logic, and if A happens, then B is the proper response, and if I don't know the proper response, how do I arrive at the proper response? Like, I don't know how he got there, because I've never heard anyone, I'm sure there's players that think similarly to him and have had success with it, but I've never heard anyone verbally say it the way he said it and actually explain it in the way so clearly that, like, it's almost like his philosophy of the game. And it seems like the correct way, almost, if you were to say the correct way to play the game, is the way that he's viewing the game.
Well, I think this is also, like, this isn't something new to him. Towards the end of StarCraft, he was playing legit. He was learning to play legit. He was putting the building blocks to like become or to learn the way the game, the way he's learning Warcraft 3 right now.
Yes.
And that was 2014. So 2015 on, he's had this mentality. This has been his learning mentality now. So it's like built into him.
Yes.
Like it's the way he knows how to learn the game. So this is almost 6 years later, like in the making, you know? So he's already developed these long before he came back to Warcraft 3. He's just finding success with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy. It's really definitely the greatest player I've ever had the opportunity to work with ever. Greatest player I've ever seen in NA also ever.
And he's really got the potential to even get better, which is crazy because he's obviously, we hype him up a lot because he's North America and we're teammates with him and we think he's really great, but he truly is maybe a top 10 player in the world right now. And he still has potential. He's still improving. He's still making adjustments to his game. He's still learning things. And he has his own way of playing every matchup. He's not cheesing in every matchup. And I know this is an orc player, but he still plays his own standard game. And he has his own way of playing every matchup that he arrived at independently for the most part, which is so interesting that he arrived at almost his own variation of standard in every matchup. And like, I really think that he's going to get to the point where he might be the best player in the world because there's no one else that really thinks about the game the way he does.
You're going very hard on the grease gun. I would say until there's LAN, I'm not going to make a prediction like that.
Yeah.
I think he's a great player. I think a lot of people know that, but until there's LAN, we don't know what it's going to be like on stage and in the big time. You know, he's been on LAN. He's done very well. He beat Lolliot and stuff like that. So he's got experience.
Yes.
But I think it's top 10 in the world. It's just us saying that. And I don't like that. Yes. And it's just going to piss people off.
There's a little bit of fanboying there, of course. Yes, for sure.
I am totally ready to stay silent until the day comes, in which case I will just gladly smile on the camera with the grin on my face saying, you know, I knew it all along, but I think it's way too early right now to make those calls. But because who knows, like, you know, everyone else is going to turn it up. Like if Poland happened, it would have been nuts.
Yeah.
It would have been nuts, you know?
And it's so interesting on top of, we're talking about the strategy side of things and the mental game. How do I improve this? If there's something that goes wrong in game, how do I improve upon it? Did I do something wrong or did my opponent do something good? There's that side of things, which is how you learn and improve. But then you mentioned something like the mental side when he gets to LAN, when he faces these players that have the experience that he may have gone to 5-6 LANs, but these players have gone to 500 LANs. And, you know, they know how to prepare for opponents. They know how to study replays of their opponents and counter their strategies outside of the standard. So there's another layer that maybe he doesn't have the experience of that you can only sort of gain from doing and going to LANs. And that's probably where he's going to fall off as a player at these offline events or even in competition in general, is this experience and this thing that's sort of in the ether that you can't really explain that some of these players have. I think Grubby is a really good example of someone who was really good offline, who could sort of counter his opponent and outplay his opponent just based off knowledge of them in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And we've seen him at LAN. We saw him at Anaheim. This kid's focused when he wants to be. Like he's hardly any fun at all come match time, which is which is good. You know, that's the mentality I would want. I would want people to be like, if people were less serious and just wanted to party, I'd be like, what are you doing here? You know, Hitman knows when I'm going to Anaheim for this Friday, Saturday, Sunday to win the game. You know, we'll drink after, but you know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm locked in. And we saw him like literally wired in. You know, he was practicing all the time. Moon and Lynn were on stage. He didn't care. He was playing the game. He wasn't even looking. Like the screen, he couldn't see the games. Just grinding. So this guy, you know, when it comes to LAN, he'll be ready.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Okay, cool. Well, I think we're going to take a little bit of a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do some questions from chat. Does that sound good?
All right.
All right, beautiful. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, we're back. We're back and we're not frozen. All right. So we'll do some questions, then we'll do some closing remarks and stuff like that. Touch on some other stuff. There was one question earlier that I read that I want to get before I forget it. He said, was there any players in the past that you managed and they sort of got too big for the team and then left? They took a salary, something like that. I guess that's sort of the end goal for any manager, is that's what you want. You want your players to go and take a big salary. Has that happened to you?
Yeah, in Starcraft II, Our captain, SWS, ended up getting a contract with Storm Gaming, so he left the team for a bit, and he ended up coming back. But yeah, he did take like a bigger contract, which was cool at the time because we recruited him as a diamond nobody, and he ended up becoming like this really high-end GM Protoss in America. So
yeah,
that was cool. In Warcraft 3, there was constantly players going in and out because if there was an opportunity, they would take it. I think Ted going back to Wii was obviously big at the time when I was on Rage.
Yep.
When I was on eHOME,
probably happened a lot with the Asians. I would imagine they would go back and forth and switch around quite a bit.
Yeah, when I was on eHOME, it mostly stayed the same until I left. In StarCraft II, though, we went through roster changes like crazy.
Right.
But just because like StarCraft II was huge, and if, like I said, if there was an opportunity, like you had to say yes. And I think that's the biggest thing that we tried to do with Dust was, we've talked about this before, but we just want to get NA on the map. And like if an EG wants to pick up Victor, more power to you. Like the fact that we can take this kid from spamming go on East custom games, to a seat on a huge team, is literally what we're doing it for. So hey, still might be an option.
Yes, it's definitely. You would say that I'm correct in saying that's probably the goal of every manager, right?
Of course, to see your player move on to bigger, better things. Of course, that's the dream.
For sure.
As long as they include you in the interviews down the road.
As long as they throw some of that drip down the line.
Yeah, I'll take Fiverr. I'll take 5%. Yeah,
why not?
In perpetuity, of course.
Yeah, retroactively, perpetuity. Is owning an org stressful? Someone asks.
Oh yeah.
Is it stressful?
Oh yeah. Okay, so
because I think there's an idea, this is interesting. Some people think, and this is maybe venturing a little bit outside of gaming, but people think, especially for people that are like streamers, or we've had the luxury of being able to cast recently quite a bit, people say, if only I could be in that position, I would do such a good job and it would be so easy and I would work 14 hours a day and I would be the best at it. Right? I think that's a very common thought for someone. If only I could be signed to a record label, I'd be the greatest guitarist in the world, and all I'd do is practice. So I think people maybe have that thought about, one, pro players. If I could be in the position of a pro player, all I would do is grind and watch replays. If I could be in the position of a team owner, all I would do would be work, and it wouldn't be stressful. It's my dream job, so maybe there's some things that people don't actually realize until they're in that position, right?
So something I didn't realize until you get into it, this is probably the best advice I could ever give anybody that wants to own something in esports, is really, let me try to word this properly.
Yeah, take your time.
I would say build a foundation and don't go over your head. Because you're going to have opportunities where you could pick up a player. If you pay, I don't know, there's an opportunity to pick up a player for $300 a month, or $500 a month, $1,000 a month. And you get so lost in like, that's what I need to do to get to the next level. So you take this plunge, and you always want to be staying the same or moving up. So for example, if you pick up a player and you're paying $1,000 a month, when you lose that player, all you've lost is just this money, and now you went down.
Yes.
I think it's always good to build a flatbed foundation, and sometimes less is more.
Right.
Let me give an example. For Dust League, I've always set the prize pool at $400. Okay, I would love for the prize pool to be $10,000.
Yes.
Okay, but $400 for me is something sustainable that I could run for years, and it's my job that the prize money is not that big, but it's stable. The league isn't going anywhere at this price point. I could keep running it. It's totally fine. If I made it $10,000 a season, I would run one every 10 years.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And sometimes that's not worth it. And I think as an owner, you're going to run into, for example, I would run into like, he's on the market now, pick him up. So you're going to talk to him, and you're going to negotiate with that player, and you're going to come up with, he wants this much a month or whatever. And this goes for anything. Don't get in over your head. Think with your brain, negotiate with your brain, and sometimes know that having something stable that isn't going to financially drain you or give you stress is always better to lay a foundation that is solid and not going anywhere regardless of any other things that happen. For example, if you're 50-50 partners with somebody, don't ever make it so that you have to, God, this is so hard to explain. Don't ever make it so that if that person leaves, you can't do it on your own.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, and that's like not going in over your head. So I think just always have it. If I do it like this, I can do this forever.
Yes.
And it's totally fine. It's not going to stress me out. So that's what I think. Build a foundation from the start that's solid. Don't go in over your head. Don't buy into the impulse moves that you think you need to do that will just end up biting you in the ass and losing you money. Always look for the best return on investment.
Yeah. And then what I like to say is it's all gravy past there. As long as you don't go in over your head and invest too much into it and put, and say you're going to do much more than you're actually able to do, it's all gravy, everything that you gain on top of that.
And it's really not about being a cheap fuck.
Right.
It's about keeping the train moving. So many people think, they get in over their head and they make these deals that, it falls out and now the team disbands and it's gone.
Right.
And it's like, it's just horrible business moves. Keep yourself sustainable so that you don't have to rely on anyone. The ship moves with you and you're comfortable at X.
Yes.
And if X stays the same, we got something. And it could grow from there. And only growth. Stay the same or move up. Don't ever go down. And that goes with recruiting players. That goes with building tournaments. That goes with anything that you want. Just build a foundation and stick to it.
Cool. Awesome. And that was added on top of is it a money pit? I think somewhat was answered because you're always sort of just floating.
Oh, I will never get the money back that I've spent over never. But I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I was passionate about it. I wanted to watch at the time Starcraft II players flourish and grow, and I did that. And I wanted to pick up I wanted to have a corporate sponsor back my team that I built in my bedroom. And they did that, and that's why I did it. I did it for to prove something to myself, I think. And I've always tried to be like a man of my word. Always be a man of your word if you're an owner. If you say you're going to pay it, pay it. If you say you're going to do it, do it. The worst thing you can do is be this guy that flip-flops and everything just disbands. And on Monday it's something, on Tuesday it's something else, and
I'm moving to Valorant. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to be like that. I've seen so many people that are like, oh, I'm going to start this show match, and they never do it, and or I'm going to start the show match, and they do it, and they don't pay.
I think
they pay
too grandiose of ideas.
Yeah, and it's just, honestly, that's why I say just lay the foundation, have something solid, bulletproof, build a plan, and be okay with the fact that you can stay at that for 5 years. You don't have to have growth right away.
Yeah.
And that's why the foundation will keep you home, man. Like that 400 Dust League, I could do that for the rest of my life until I die. And then anything that comes from it is bonus, is gravy. And yeah, that's the way I've always looked at things. And I've had Dust since 2012. So we're going on almost 10 years.
Yeah.
That, nothing's really bad happened because I had that mentality. So it's worked for me. And then it's just your job to grind and keep the train moving and grow. So yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. And then there was a couple things you touched on there, but I think this is a good question if there's anything else too. Is there anything if you go back in time and tell yourself, would you decide to switch to full-time managing when you decide to become an owner, stuff like that? Would you change anything or the timing of anything if you could go back and tell yourself, as you said, like 10 years ago?
That's a great question. That's a great question. The answer is obviously yes. If I knew the marketing things that I knew now in 2012 when I first started the team, we would have probably grew a lot faster and maybe taken advantage of the window that was the Starcraft II scene. I kind of learned a little bit later when everything was losing its hype and money and stuff like that. I wish I had a time capsule for sure. Yeah. That's a great question. There's so much. I would have bought Bitcoin earlier. I would have bought, I would have made Dippin' Dots, of course, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. But like as a team owner, obviously you learn as you go, but I just like to look at those. I don't look at those as like, if I had a time machine, I would do this because I lost out. I looked at it as like, it wasn't my time. Yeah. It wasn't my time. I didn't have the knowledge yet. It wasn't my time. It was their time. They were in the right place at the right time. They got to relish it. My time will come. Just keep learning, keep trying to build something. Try to innovate. Always try to innovate. Look to others for inspiration. Man, if I had a time capsule, what would I change? I would change everything, but no, everything was worth it, man. All those $2,000 flights I paid out of pocket that I never got return on, they all meant something at the end of the day.
You still talk about him being to Muslim, as NA always does. NA always remembers.
NA remembers. No, I wouldn't. It made me who I am today. So like, I can't really go back and take it away because maybe, yeah. But it's a great question, though.
Yeah. Yeah, Spiral actually has a really good question. Any ideas, hopes, how we could bring back the clan war scene like it used to be? I think that's pretty cool. Like any old ideas from the past we could bring back for clan wars or tournaments that you sure used to organize tournaments in the past as well. Anything we could bring back from in the past, any formats or stuff like that. Because honestly, I personally don't. I've done a little bit of managing before Dust, but never really much of anything. So you have much more experience in what used to be in 2010,
yeah,
2011.
The team league scene right now is it's just really bad. It's not fun. It's not engaging. I don't know what to do. I think the funding is a big problem.
Yeah, it's always crowdfunded. There's never any sponsorships or anything. I think is a big.
But like, who wants to spend 6 months playing video games on not ideal ping to split $6.50 for each teammate? You know, if there was something to play for, having something to truly play for, and maybe that's like having free qualifiers, but maybe a LAN,
right?
Maybe a team league LAN would change it around. Big funding, obviously. I don't know. It's kind of on the teams too. You know, the teams don't really do anything. Back in the day, you would have statements that were fun. You would have these like cool ways of like showing, but the games were hype and the leagues were hype too.
Yeah, so it was marketing on a more grand scale than just the individual players, as we were talking on earlier. It was the teams being marketable on top of that. So that's maybe something that managers have to step up and do. That you can't just manage the players and tell them when to show up. You have to do what we expected the players as well. You have to be marketable. You have to get out there. You have to do social media, stuff like that, I think, to make the leagues bigger than they are currently.
But I'm just looking at it from like my team's perspective. Like our players are losing interest in team leagues all the time. Like we might not even sign up for the next season because there's just no interest and there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
I don't know, man. I really don't know what to change. I really don't have the answer to that. I would say, like, obviously, if there was a $10,000 team league, we saw that WGTL, there was interest there, but it was also just straight netties at a crap time for us. So it's not ideal. So, you know, but there was definitely hype. It's hard, man. It's really hard. I don't know how you revitalize the team league scene. Maybe it won't. Sorry, I don't know. I don't see it right now.
Yeah, there's also an interesting point there where if there was like a bigger team league scene, there's this side of things that maybe you could touch on briefly a little bit about like clan wars and like what the actual role of like, maybe there's not aspiring players in the chat, but maybe there's aspiring managers or coaches, stuff like that. And what actually is sort of, you could almost say, the skill side in terms of planning clan wars, planning matches, stuff like that on the management side of things in clan wars and tournaments and stuff like that. Rosters I'm talking about, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, you know what? It's NA has always had a very competitive mentality, and I think that's what separates a lot of NA managers from EU or Asian managers, is that a lot of people look at things differently. So, for example, obviously scheduling a clan war, it speaks for itself. Just schedule the clan war ideal for your players.
You could, anyone could really do that.
Anyone can do that, right?
Yeah.
I think where we've had a lot of success is matchmaking and putting lineups in. And I feel like a lot of teams are just kind of like robotic, and they're kind of like
I will put the elf on AZ.
Yeah. And which is so weird to me, because that mentality wasn't even good back then. And I feel like players just go like, oh, Secret Valley, Orc. And it's like, well, then you're just opening the door for someone like me who has like matchmaking experience to just look at that and go, well, they're just going to put an Orc here. So I know that this player can beat any of their Orcs. And that's the way I've done matchups in particular. I think I'm really good. I've been coined the Belichick of matchmaking. I've always been good at that, but that's come from NA. That's come from like metagaming, and we see that in like Dota and like hero bans, or like maybe maybe even Counter-Strike, where like maps get banned to like psych another team out. You know what I mean? But we don't see that in Warcraft 3.
It's at a smaller scale when there's not teams involved, I think. Like, I mean, literally teams within the game, 5 people playing together. I think it's on a smaller scale for the coaching and management side of things, maybe.
Yeah, so like I would say like what will make you like stand out, and maybe you don't have the best roster, but you can win games with good matchups, is really just like looking at the team, right? What's the manager like? How does he normally seed? Look at former seedings. Does he go by the book and the maps, or does he switch it up a bit? Right. If he switches it up a bit, is it because of player availability? For example, he's not putting the elf on AZ because there's no elf that plays. He's got 5 elves on his roster, nobody plays. So maybe they're inactive. And maybe they don't want to play on this map, or maybe, you know, they're just being told where to play. So there's a lot of things that I look at before I'm playing a team. I look at the history of the roster, who's playing, who's active, who do I think's going to play. I think a lot of people look at our lineup and they go, Cruncher, Hitman, Hunter, Longwalk are going to play every week. It's not true. That's not the case. You know, that's a horrible way of looking at it. So they'll make lineups based on the best, but it should be the most probable, and that's when they get stomped, because instead of me playing into their cards, they're kind of playing into mine, and I go, I think they think I'm going to put Hitman here, so I'm going to put him here. And like if I'm playing, like we've beaten Soviet War Elites, the Swedish team, every single time because they're so predictable. Like Trenna stands in the map, that's where Crunchers, or that's where Thorzane's going to be. So if I want to steal wins against Starshaped and the other weaker players, I'm going to not put Hitman on Trenna's stand. And it works out every time. Like, you have to really just metagame who you're playing, and I think that's helped me out. And that comes from ONU used to do that. ONU used to have sick matchups because they would actually sit down and like think of lineups, not just go, well, Secret Valley Orc trying to stand human. It's a horrible way of looking at it. And I think that's how we like did so well, minus losing to UMAT in the finals. Like, we almost took a team league title because we were just had that mentality of just like,
that's really cool too. Sorry, finish your point, and then I have a
point. I would get to the point where I'm literally telling Hitman, you're going to play Starshaped or him. You OC, you're going to play him or him. And Cruncher, you will play him because they're going to put him on. And I'm usually always right, which is weird. There's been like an occasional curveball, but I can't account for everything. But just thinking about matchups, and as a manager, it's your job to give to win, first of all, but to also give your players exactly what they're practicing for. I can literally tell OC, you need to practice against Undead because you're going to play against Terror when we play the UMAD finals. That's what I told him. You're going to play against Terror. And lo and behold, he played against Terror. Now, was he prepared? No, he still lost. But, you know, my job's done. Players still have to perform, but I can literally look at a roster, look at a team, look at a lineup and go, I know exactly who we're going to play against. And this is the plan for the day. And it's worked out very well so far. And, that's a huge edge, I think, as being like a manager, thinking outside the box, having all these crayons, which are players, and painting a picture. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I loved about being a manager. That's why I wanted to be a manager in the first place. I never had the skill to win these games. I can't play at this level. But as a manager, you're almost like Ash Ketchum, and you have all of these players at your disposal. And it's like just your Tesla, and you're just Hitman, and the Cruncher, you know, and you're like, that's the power I love. I love being able to utilize these players and win.
And you can tell them to use Rock Slide, but you can't actually make a Rock Slide yourself.
I could, and I could tell them, like, you know, and having this knowledge of like who plays like what, like I can go to Hitman playing against Edo and go, dude, he's going to make frost rooms against you. It's going to make no sense at all.
And that is where the sort of not playing but watching 3,300 games can actually come into use, which is really cool.
I can tell you so much about every player, how they play. I've probably watched 50 games of every player that's ever played so far. And yeah, it helps you out a lot. You just have this knowledge of like Longwalk will play against someone, and he's like, I don't know anything about him. I'm like, I do. This is how he does. This is how he plays.
He plays Potom Hunts and Mir every time, something like that.
Yep, he's gonna Potom Hunts you. You know, it's just having that knowledge. So there's so many. It's not just being a manager and scheduling a clan war. There's actually skill and knowledge that go into it if you're a good manager. And if you're playing someone that thinks like me, then we got a really good match on our hands. And that's why I always had a hard time against Fade and Yosh, because we were constantly just countering each other's counters.
Yes.
And then the lineups were just this shit show of like, you know, what the hell is this, you know? So yeah, I think it's a good question. And nobody in Warcraft 3 has ever done this, by the way. No team we've ever played, UMAD, Sweden, Oceanus, none of them have ever thought or played in this way.
It's been the most obvious every time.
It's been the most obvious all the time. And, you know, thank you. But yeah, I think it blows my mind that people don't think in a more metaphysical way. I don't know.
That's kind of a cool word. I dig it.
Metaphysical, I think, is what I'm trying to think about. Like, think outside of the box.
Metagaming within roster.
Metagaming, yeah. Because I'm metagaming you every single time.
Well, that would almost make it. I think this is a cool point. We're talking about how to make the leagues more hype, and if the teams are more of a unison formed group of people, so the players aren't looking up at the management and saying, "You don't do anything to help me, therefore I am better than you. Therefore, you know, just tell me when to show up and I'll show up." If the players were to look at them as, oh, you know, like a coach sort of thing, like, oh, they're part of the team as well, and then we're one cognizant unit, and then all the teams are going against each other, and everyone from top to bottom in that unit is sort of working together to be super competitive, I think that could make it hype, because then you could get, you know, managers saying to each other, oh, I'm going to counter your roster and stuff like that, and then players on an individual level saying, I'm going to snipe you, I'm going to beat you in this match, and it could make it a lot more hype if it's from a top down and not just, there's going to be an Elf Mir on AZ. There's going to be a Mountain King Human Mir on TS. The Orcs are going to meet on EI, whatever, you know?
Yeah, and I know that all kill format is very like, whoever has the best player on the team is going to win.
Just all kills, yeah.
But those are usually the most hype matches. I love the way WGTL did it. Is like, you didn't know who was playing until they were both announced at the same time. So we could actually sit down as a team and think about who we want to play next. And that's not an all kill format, right? So I really like that. Maybe that's what you do, because you need to engage the teams more. Right now, the team leagues are like, here's our lineup, play, or like, you know, the lineup set, play. But like, there needs to be more like sitting down, like the old Ventrilo days when like 8 players on the team would sit down and be like, you know what? Like, I'll play on Echo Isles. Are you sure? Yeah, I think I could beat him. They're going to put out him.
Like a team would
do. And teams used to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was fun and it was hype. And then you'd have players like, you know what? Like, no, Cruncher, you're better. Like, you should sit back. I'll do this one. Even if I lose, like, you're going to win and we can win. And like, it's players hatching in, how are we going to get that 3-2 or that 4-1 or that, you know, how do we get that back? I don't know. But
the game within the game, almost. Yeah,
those were the glory days, you know?
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, for sure. Okay, maybe one more question that we'll do, because I think this is a really good question from Mythos, is saying, and this sort of touches on a lot of the things we've been talking about. For someone who's interested in starting an org, how do you literally begin? Like, what is sort of the first steps in starting an org, from your point of view? Because you sort of did it from literally the ground up, from starting the game to getting into ZOTAC, to starting to manage EHOME and stuff like that. So you did it bottom up, but from someone who's already in the game, already in the scene, what would be your first steps to starting a new org?
So I used to say, 10 years ago, you need a website, and you need a logo, and you need this, and you need that. And the truth is, just build, I mean, you have to give whatever org you have a name, a more simple, like, brand. You have to give it like a brand, you know? You have to. You can't just say, join my team. What's it called? It doesn't have a name. Right. So, I mean, give it to something that's, you know, meaningful to you. And then just, you don't need a website. You need some form of social media at the start, for sure. You need some way of people to engage in it. Otherwise, it does not exist. And for example, if I believe if you are not on Twitter, you do not exist.
Right.
You do not exist. Yeah. You're not a thing. You're not real, and you're nothing.
Jesus.
Honestly.
2021 eSports.
You need some form of social media, and Twitter right now is just the mecca. I think it's bigger than Facebook's kind of a dinosaur. Instagram, nobody's really doing that for esports stuff. So Twitter, and so just build a brand that you're comfortable with, that you're excited about. Twitter, and then go. And like I said, lay a foundation of, this is the goal. We're a group. I mean, if you start off, you're pretty green, right? I mean, you're not going to have any funding. You're not going to have anything. So I think the key is just to bring in people that also are trying to build something for themselves, and have like a goal in mind. Do we want to be a team that plays, or do we want to be a stream team, or do we want to be just marketing? Do we want to be the team that wins all the leagues? How do we use that to grow? You need a model that can actually grow something.
Yeah.
And I found that the biggest way to do that is to gain, build a market team, a stream team of engaging the audience, because like I said, it's more than playing the game. And then just, a lot of grinding, a lot of hard work, and you can get to where you want to be. But it's hard, man. It's hard for grassroots with no funding and no backing off the start. It's really, really hard. And have a good core group of people to help you with the same goals. But like I said, don't rely on them, because if they say, I'm out, don't be screwed by that. Don't be deterred. Don't dissolve the team because you went outside of your capabilities. Stay within your own means, and just grind. And I mean, you'll build something.
Very cool. I think that's a very good point to end on. I think it's been a really good conversation, man. I've enjoyed this quite a bit. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I didn't know what this was going to be like, but it's a good deep dive into people, man. I'm really excited to see future interviews with other people. It was cool to go over my past. I've never done that before. I've always dreamed that someone would interview me about my past. That's been my dream, and I would just spill all the beans. But yeah, it's been a good trip down memory lane.
Yeah, this has been fun. There's a lot of stuff. Like, it seems, I've known you for a long time, but I legitimately didn't know actually any of these things, with the exception of what's happened, like I said at the start, in the past 2 years. I really didn't actually know any of this. So it was fun to be able to ask you about it, in a structured format. And if you guys like this, let me know, of course. If you don't like it, let me know as well. We're going to do more interviews in the future, in the 4th episode every month of TheoryCraft. Next week is going to be how Happy deals with Keeper the Grove Mass Air for Undead Strategy Week. And I'm
watching that one.
Yeah,
I'm watching that one.
I'm sure you'll like that one. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And we'll see you next week. Ricky, any closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
You know what? I'm just right now my main focus is working with Dust and the team aspect, working with the players. Obviously, me and you are doing a lot of casting on Back to Warcraft. That's going to be my plan for for this year. If I'm not at work, I will be casting on Back to Warcraft or streaming on my own channel, which is Bidoux Warcraft 3. And just continuing to put in a lot of effort into this game that I love, and doing it with the people that I love, which is, you, of course, and everyone else. And that's my plan for the future. That's what I'm doing. This is a really sick show, man. Thank you.
Thanks. Follow this man on Twitter at Ricky Robidoux. Follow him on Twitch at Bidoux Warcraft 3, and watch him here on Back to Warcraft on occasion. Comment in the YouTube if you like it. Comment in the YouTube if you don't like it. Let me know how I can improve the show, and we will see you next week for Undead Week. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Ricky. Goodbye.
Goodbye.